So welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us today. Our commemoration today, we remember our families, our parents, siblings, our friends, and those whom we knew in the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda, as the genocide was happening. It's been 28 years ago, and this day we want to recognize the survivors who have endured so much and whose resilience and courage has sustained them to this point. And so we want to thank you, everyone, and thank you also for all the supports that the community in Calgary has given to us. So we are greatly appreciative. To this point, I want to recognize the land upon which we stand. So we want to recognize that Rwandan Canadian Society of Calgary stands on the traditional lands of the Nitsitapi, Blackfoot people, Treaty 7 nations, and the Métis nations. I would like to recognize Treaty 7, the Tsuut'ina Nation, Piikani Nation, Kainai Nation, Siksika Nation, and Nakoda Nation. Given the importance and solemnity of our gathering, it is fitting that we recognize and acknowledge our location and Canada's own history towards its first peoples. So once again, I want to thank you for being with us, and I'll now give it to our MC, Larissa Amour, who is going to be leading our program today. Thank you, Larissa, may you take on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have a couple of hours here in a really lovely program for us to partake in together. We have a few video messages of support by Honorable Nathan Cooper and Eustace Shutabuzwa. We also have a moment where we'll hear from Mama Diane, who will be speaking about the 1959 massacres. 2 book readings, one from Daddy Max and the other from Christine McGill and Gabby. And then our keynote speaker, Consolé, will lead us at around 4:10. We have a lovely poem by Cousteau also that I will read. And we will also have a question and answer period. So if you have any questions or comments or concerns, maybe save that towards the end, and we'll do that around 5 o'clock. So right now, we are going to hear a video message of support from Honorable Nathan Cooper, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta.
Rwanda can be paradise again, but it will take the love of the entire world to heal my homeland. And that's how it should be. For what happened in Rwanda happened to all of us. Humanity was wounded by genocide. Mriwiwe. Good afternoon, I'm Nathan Cooper, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. That quote from Immaculée Ilibagiza is both hopeful and painfully accurate at the same time. The heart of humanity was broken by unimaginable atrocities suffered by the Tutsi people when their own neighbors violently ended the lives of more than 800,000 people in 100 days. The only light that comes from such deep darkness is education and awareness, as well as determination. The Rwandan Canadian Society of Calgary is a beacon of light to so many. Your work is not only admirable, but it is critical as the keepers of Rwandan culture. with the values to create friendship and build community spirit as you empower the next generation of the children of survivors. As you begin Kwibuka 28, may you spend the next 100 days honoring the memories of the men, women, and children who were taken far too soon. And may you reflect on the dangers of hate and discrimination so that you might find hope and healing to pass on to the children of survivors. Their resilience can heal your homeland and make Rwanda a paradise once more. I wish you peace throughout this time of remembrance. Murakoze Miru.
Okay, now Bienvenue will introduce the government representative, Lieutenant Colonel Eustache Rutabuzwa, to speak on our behalf here.
Yeah, thank you, Arisa. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bienvenue Wabigwi, and I'm the president of Rwanda Community Abroad of Calgary. So, yeah, I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Eustache Rutabuzwa, the Rwanda Defense Attaché to Canada based in Ottawa. So prior to his current assignment in Canada, it's Lieutenant Colonel Rutabuzwa served as intelligence analyst within the Rwanda Defense Force, Department of Defense Intelligence, intelligence assessment officer within UN MIS in South Sudan, and finance officer within UNAMID in Darfur, Sudan. Lieutenant Colonel Rutabuzwa, thank you very much for taking the time to join us and speak with us today. We are very honored to have you here with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rwanda Community Abroad Chair, Mr. Gwabigwi Bienvenue. Thank you, MC Larissa Amour, for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Rwandan High Commissioner, Prosper Higiro, who is attending other events with our communities elsewhere. So, fellow Rwandans in Calgary, survivors of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi, friends of Rwanda, distinguished guests, good afternoon. Miriweho. Allow me to thank the RCA Calgary for having organized this event of marking the 28th commemoration of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi today. I also would like to express my gratitude to all of you, as well as friends of Rwanda, who chose to be in solidarity with us today. As you all know, every April 7th, our country marks the commemoration of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi in the honor of the 1,076,000 innocent people who lost their lives during those tragic moments in just 100 days, spanning from 4th April up to 7 April up to 4th July 1994. We do commemorate to keep alive the memory of our loved ones. We are here to stand side by side with those who survived, with those who lost friends and families who are still struggling to overcome the consequences of genocide. We are here to remind the world to reject the genocide ideology, genocide denial, and genocide revisionism, and to remind that justice for the victim is needed today than ever. We all know that the consequences of genocide have badly impacted the mental health of genocide survivors. For them, genocide is not the past, but an ever-present from the trauma they still continue to suffer. To survivors of genocide, thank you once again. Your resilience, your courage, represent the triumph over the evil you have experienced. We want to assure you that you are not alone. You may have lost your loved ones, but you are not alone. There is something that you still have, and that is your country, your nation, and as well as your friends. So we therefore ask you to continue to be courageous and let not the past overtaken you, because there is nothing we cannot do about our past, but sincerely, there is something we can do about our present as well as our future. The lessons of our history have united us more and are teaching us the value of good leaderships that cares for the well-being of all citizens. This is a moment to share our tragic history and learn from it. And indeed, it is an opportunity to reflect with young people and the new generation on what made the genocide to happen. And this is the time to try to understand how the unspeakable happened by confronting our past. Moving forward, Rwanda has been transformed politically, socially, and economically. Today, Rwanda enjoys peace and stability. It is today ranked among the safest places in the world and even contributes to global peace through participating in peacekeeping and globally ranks third largest contributor to UN peacekeeping forces. Rwanda will continue to work and share the information regarding genocide perpetrators, deniers, and revisionists with the countries across the world, and looking forward to more cooperation in identifying and arresting those who are still at large. Rwanda has emerged stronger from this tragedy and became a nation of hope and prosperity and equal opportunity for its people. Today, our country is stable and progressing. Fellow Rwandans, lastly, I wish to comfort the genocide survivors and I wish them to remain strong during this painful period. Stay assured that the government of Rwanda remains supportive to you, remains behind you, stand with you, and will always support you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Stash, for that lovely message of courage and hope. That was really lovely. Now we are going to be introduced. Diane Mwali is going to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Rosalie Nyaramaliza, and she will be our next speaker.
Thank you so much, everybody. Allow me to introduce you my mom, Rosalie Nyaramaliza. She's currently living in Toronto. Mom, it's your turn. Mom, can you unmute? Mama, correctly unmute. Yeah, you're good. What is up?
Muraho neza bavandimwe, ndabaramukije mbifuriza gukomera muri ibihe bitoroshye. twibuka inzirakarengane zacu zapfukijwe ubuzima muri Jenoside yakorewe Abatutsi mu 1994. Nitwa Nyiramariza Rosalie, mvuka mu majyaruguru y'igihugu cy'u Rwanda, akarere ka Burera, umurenge wa Kinoni, akagari ka Kabaguma. Ndagira ngo mbasangize ubuhamya bw'ibyo nibuka mu mwaka w'1959, umwaka wabayemo iyicwa n'itotezwa no kwangazwa bw'ubwoko bw'Abatutsi. Muraza kumbabarira ndajya mbivuga uko biri kuko niyo mateka. Muri uwo mwaka mu kwezi kwa karindwi niho umwami Mutara Rudahigwa yatanze. Nari umwana muto wiga primaire, ariko nabonaga ibintu nkumva n'iby'abakuru bavuga. Mu kwezi kwa munani 1959 twatangiye kubona indege zita impapuro mu kirere zikamanuka hasi, abana tukiruka tukazifata, ababyeyi bakazitwaka, bazisoma tukabona ku maso yabo bagize ubwoba, abana ntitubitahure, ariko byari bitangiye kuba bibi. Ubu nisobanurira ko bari batangiye kubika ubwoba mu Batutsi, kuko twumvaga bavuga ngo parime hutu iratumara. Ubwo mu kwezi kwa 9 amashuri yari atangiye. Umuvandimwe wanjye yari yaje mu rugo kubera yigishaga ku Nyundo, abwira ababyeyi banjye ati kubera uyu mwana yiga kure, reka mutwaraho nigisha ku Nyundo. Ubwo ni mu kwezi kwa 9 amashuri yari agiye gutangira.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anizi. I'm going to try to summarize what Mama Diane just said. So for those who don't understand Kinyarwanda, you can have an idea about her testimony. So her name is Nyiramariza Rosalie. She's from the northern province of Rwanda, is in the district of Burera. So the event she's going to talk about this afternoon to us, it's what happened in 1959 when they started the killings and the discrimination against people of Tutsi ethnic group. This happened just after the murder of our king by the Belgian. And then so the Tutsi started experiencing harassment, dehumanization, because, you know, they were trying to sow the fear and the confusion about the community of Tutsi. So they had like piece of papers falling down from the sky by helicopters with messages of intimidation. So they wanted just the Tutsi to start feeling unwanted, feeling the fear. Because Rosalie was still a child, they were trying to understand what was happening, but the parents, of course, they could read the fear on the eyes of the parents, but the parents, of course, they didn't want to worry the children. So Rosalie, she was since she was still young, and the village where she was going to school, the school was too far. So a relative of hers who was a teacher in one good school took her to go live with her so she can be closer to school. So yeah, you can go on, Mama.
Ubwo twageze ku ishure ku Nyundo, hashize amezi 2 tugiye kubona tubona inzu zirashya ku misozi, kumva bavuga ngo Abatutsi, ngo Abahutu barimo gutwikira Abatutsi, ko twari abana ntitubisobanukirwe, ariko noneho tugiye tubona abantu baza bavirirana amaraso bahigwa, byari bikomeye. Abana bakadufata bakajya bajya kuduhisha mu mashuri ngo tutabona ibyo bintu uko bimeze, ariko bazanaga n'abapfuye bikadutera ubwoba. Abayobozi b'amashuri bari abakobwa b'abarayike bigishaga mu kigo aho ku Nyundo, ariko ubwo aho ngaho hari ibigo bitatu, icy'ababikira, petit seminaire n'icyo ngicyo, ariko noneho ab'ubwoko bwahigwaga baza kuduteranyiriza hamwe. Ubwo yari umurimo ukomeye wo kurokora abatutsi benshi icyo gihe. Harimo umubirigikazi ariko wari umuntu mwiza cyane witwa Marie Jeanne, wamenyekanye cyane gutabara imbabare, Imana imwakire mu bwami bwayo. Abo bicanyi bashakaga no kudusanga mu mashuri ngo batwice, ariko kubera batinyaga Musenyeri Bigira Umwami ntibatinyuke bagasubira inyuma. Ibiruhuko bya Noheli rero byarageze nyine, ariko ubwo ngubwo mu magambo make hari induru, hari iki, ariko twakomeje ku ishuri kubera ko hari disipurine y'abo bakobwa b'ababirigikazi b'abarayike, bakomeza bacungerera umutekano abanyeshuri. Ibiruhuko rero bya Noheli byarageze ndabyibuka. Twebwe tuguma muri ibyo bigo by'ishuri, hanyuma abahutukazi bo barataha kuko bajyaga iwabo, hanyuma bagarutse vakanse zishize baza badutuka cyane, baza bacunaguza batumwaza ngo turebe uko dusa. Ndabyibuka rwose, naho nari umwana ariko ndabyibuka, tukayoberwa ibyo tuzira, bakatumwaza kandi koko tukamwara. Icyakora kubera disipurine yari mu rugo ntabwo batinyukaga kudukoraho ngo badukubite cyangwa batwice. Twabagaho nabi mu bitutsi ariko tukabana. Twakomeje kwiga nabi kuko ntitwari tuzi aho ababyeyi bacu byabashyikiye. Hagati mu mwaka w'1960 niho namenye ko abo mu karere k'iwacu babakusanyirije mu Ruhengeri mu mujyi, bavuga ngo bazabatwara i Bugesera kubata mu mashyamba yaho.
So here, while Rosalie was at school, that girls' school, so the killings started, and then they started seeing houses of Tutsi people around the school being burned down. People were trying to find the refuge at the school. So at that time, the school was managed by a congregation of sisters, of laic sisters from Belgium. So those sisters, they tried to really help as they could. They saved a big number of people, especially one specific sister. Her name was Mary Jane. She did everything she could to rescue certain people. But of course, most of them, when they were getting to that school, they were already heavily injured, and some of them died over there. So the kids started experiencing trauma, seeing people being hunted down, people being covered with blood. And also, even at the school, the school was trying to protect the children, taking the Tutsis girls to gather them together and to protect them, even though the neighbors were trying to come and kill them. But they couldn't do anything at that time because they were fearing the bishop at that time was Bishop Bigirimwami, who was a Tutsi, and people were still respecting the authority. So they didn't do anything to them. So during that time, it was like a time for summer break, summer vacation. So other kids, from the Hutu ethnic group, they had houses to go back to, right? They had families to go back to, but the Tutsis didn't have anywhere to go, so they have to stay at school. And so Rosalie stayed at school at that time. And the sad thing is that when the other kids came back from the vacation, they came starting to bully them, calling them names, harassing them, shaming them, and them themselves too. The Tutsi girls were feeling a little bit awkward, a bit ashamed for no reason. So at that time, they didn't know what happened to their families. So nobody knew what happened to their families. What they knew is that they've been, they had to flee from their homes, and then they later learned that everyone was like gathered at the city of Ruhengeri to be, because the government wanted to take all the Tutsi to banish them to the forest of Bugesera. But later on, Rosalie learned that her family didn't go to Bugesera. Instead, they went with a chief of the village at that time. They went to Mutara.
ubwo mu 1960 mu mezi hagati nko mu kwezi kwa karindwi kwa aho ngaho Musenyeri Bigira Umwami yaje kohereza delegation i Bugesera kubaza ababyeyi abana mbese ababyeyi babo aho bari ariko jewe ababyeyi wanjye baje gusanga batariyo bababwira yuko bagiye mu Mutara bajyanye n'umutware badutwaraga bahungira mu Mutara. Ubwo rero 1990 ubwo nakomeje kuba mu kigo, abatari bafite ababyeyi badukomeje kuba baducungiye mu kigo nk'imfubyi. Hanyuma ariko muri 1961 niho data yaje kunsura aturutse mu Mutara, ansanga ku Nyundo, ndarira nshaka kumukurikira, aranga ati guma hangaha ku ishuri wige kuko aho turi ntabwo tumeze neza. Demoiselle Marie Jeanne arampendahenda ngumaho, ariko kubera ko numvaga nshaka ababyeyi banjye, ariko biba ngombwa ko mpaguma kubera ko data yakundaga abana biga, ati guma aho ngaho wige kuko aho turi ntabwo hameze neza. Ubwo ariko hagati aho ngaho urumva umwana utagira se utagira nyina nta bakuru ntaki, nabagaho nabi nyine, hakaba ibintu nkenera simbibone, nyine ngahora ndira kubera kubura ibyo nifuzaga byose. Hanyuma mu kiruhuko kinini cy'1961 niho nabonye uko nshobora kujya kuruhukira mu Mutara, ariko noneho uwo Mademoiselle Marie Jeanne aza kubaririza, hanyuma baramubwira bati no mu Mutara bahatwitse, uwo mwana mumwohereje ashobora gusanga nta babyeyi bahari. Ubwo nabwo byabaye ngombwa ko nguma mu kigo, ni naho natandukanye n'ababyeyi kuko ntamenye iyo bagiye. Bahise bahungira i Bugande, ubwo dutandukana gutyo. Muri make ubuzima bwarangoye cyane bw'ubupfubyi, bwarashariraga, byari amarira gusa.
So since the parents had to leave and the kids didn't have anywhere to go, but nevertheless, in 1961, Rosalie's dad came to visit. She came to the school to visit. He came to school to visit. So Rosalie, because she was so happy to see her dad, she wanted to go back with him, because living a life without the parents was very difficult for her. But her dad told her, no, you have to stay at school, you have to study. Where we are is not safe, because we are just in exile. We don't know, anything can happen any day, any time. And then she of course she cried, but with the help of the sister Mary Jane, they managed to convince her to stay, and then she had to stay. So she had to live as an orphan. She started a life like an orphan. It was difficult. She didn't have anyone to talk to. She didn't have any relative. She cannot tell her about her problems. She was lacking many things, the basic things that a child of that age needed. So during another summer break in 1961, since she knew that her parents were in Mutara, she tried to go for vacation, to go there, but someone told them that even there massacres happened there, and the houses were burned down, and they didn't know anymore if the parents were still there. And later on, they learned that everyone who was there, or the ones who survived, they managed to go to Uganda, the neighboring country.
Ndibuka amateka nayo yo mu 1962, abanyeshuri ubwo nari maze kugera muri mu mwaka année scolaire 1962 mu mwaka wa 7. Abanyeshuri bakuru b'abatutsikazi bararakaye cyane, kuko abahutu kazi bazaga kubacunaguza buri gihe, kandi harimo abanyeshuri biciwe ababyeyi babo, hanyuma baza kurwana, bararwana cyane. Ubwo twarareberaga turi abana, kubera nyine bahoraga bashyamiranye. Umuntu waje gukiza iyo mirwano ni Musenyeri Bigira Umwami, biza gutuza, ariko nabyo ndabyibuka ko byanteye ubwoba. Nicyo gituma nabyo bibabwiye. Uyu mwaka niho nabonye aho nduhukira muri grande vacances, kubera musaza wanjye wigaga muri Petit Seminaire yaje kumbona ngiye mu gusenga, tuza kumenyana. Noneho arambwira ati nzakujyana iwacu mu kiruhuko. Ubwo naje kuruhukirayo, ariko kubera nari narababaye cyane, nabwo nta munezero nagiraga.
Rosalie can just remember of one event that happened at school during that time, because you know, the kids, the Tutsis girls, most of them had lost their families. Some of them, their families have been killed. Others, their families was separated with them. They didn't know where they were. So, and they always, like, they were hearing other kids, other girls from the ethnic group Hutu, just teasing them, bullying them, and then they became more, some of them became angry, and they started fighting between girls, and they fighted so bad that the Bishop Bigira Umwami had to come to intervene. So it was something she remembers that happened at that time in 1962 in her school. But also, she said that in 1962, that's the first time she could leave the school to go during summer break to go to a relative house, because she met up with, in church, she met with her cousin who was studying at the seminary. And then that summer break, he took her to his family. So she stayed with them for that time.
Ndibuka ibindi byanteye ubwoba bikanambabaza cyane mu 1963 ubwo hari anko wanjye nari namenye ko asigaye akorera mu Ruhengeri kubera mushiki we twandikiranaga, hanyuma aza kumbwira tuzaruhukira iwacu, noneho nza kujyayo nduhukirayo naho, ariko ibintu nahaboneye n'ubu kugeza ubu sindabyibagirwa. Niho nabonye ubwicanyi bwakorewe abo bitaga abashyirahamwe, ubwo ni abantu bari mu ishyaka rya UNAR. Abo bantu babarasiye inyuma y'urugo tureba, bari bageze nko kuri 12. Uwo nibukamo ni uwitwa Mpirikanyi n'undi witwa Mutimura, ariko icyo gihe twarahahamutse tumererwa nabi cyane ku buryo navuze nti sinzagaruka hano.
Rosalie remembers another traumatic event when in 1963 she also met with an uncle of hers who was a medical assistant in Hungary. So he offered to take him for vacation, for school break, to his house as well. And then when she went there, she experienced the massacre of a group of 12 men who were part of the political party. That political party was the pro-monarchy. It was called Runar. I don't know how to call it in English. So she saw them being killed in the backyard of her uncle. People came and just shoot them, and others cut them with machetes. So it was very traumatic. Until now, she still remembers those events, and it's very difficult.
Ubwo naje kuguma mu bigo rero by'amashuri, nabayeho rero imibereho y'imfubyi mu bigo by'amashuri, hanyuma no mu miryango itandukanye imwe ntarondora, ariko narahababariraga kuko ntabonaga ababyeyi banjye, kandi ibyo nkenera ntabibona. Mbese mu magambo make ubuzima ntabwo bwari bunyoroheye. Hanyuma ariko kubera ko ntabonaga na minerivare, uwo musaza wanjye wigaga muri Petit Seminaire kwa data wacu akomeje andwanaho, ansabira abapadiri minerivare, ariko iby'Imana 1967 niho narangije ishuri ry'ubwarimu ry'aho bita Muramba.
So life continued being a very tough life of an orphan, because she didn't have anyone, but she was moving from, she was living at school most of the time, moving from one family to another during breaks. But also it was really hard to have the necessities. She was like struggling to get school fees. She was struggling to get uniforms, to get money for other things she needed. So she was relying on just the help of the priest sometimes, and her cousin was helping, trying to find someone who could help. And then, but thankfully, thank to God, in 1967, she graduated from the school, the teaching school.
ubwo rero iyo myaka ya kera umuntu yabaga arangije muri iryo shuri ry'ubwarimu bamwoherezaga aho hari imyanya, baje kunyohereza rero iwacu aho mvuka, nabyo ntibyangendekera neza. Tuhageze dutangiye gushyira abana ku murongo ngo tubinjize mu ishuri dutangire twigishe, twaje kubona igitero cy'abantu, ababyeyi b'abo bana, imihoro, ubuhiri, baje kutwica ngo ntabwo dushobora kubigishiriza abana. Ubwo twari twagambaniwe ariko n'abarimu twari dusanze aho ngaho. Imana tugira, inspecteur yari yaje aho muri icyo gitondo, yari umuntu mwiza cyane, adukubita mu modoka ye araduhungisha, adusubiza mu Ruhengeri mu mujyi, n'ibintu byacu yaze kubituzanira nyuma kubera ko yaduhungishaga ngo tuticwa. Icyo kintu nacyo rwose cyari kibabaje cyane, tubona tugiye gutangira ubuzima bwo gukora, ariko batuvutse uburyo bwo gukora.
So once she graduated from the teaching school, she's been, because they were kind of assigning them the schools they had to go to. So Rosalie with another girl who was Tutsi, they've been sent to go to teach in her home village. So once they get there, they were trying to do their job, and then one day, as they were getting ready to go into classroom to start, school, they saw a group of parents coming armed with machetes and clubs and everything. They were coming to kill them. They were telling them that you Tutsis, you have no right to teach our children. And then, so they had to, they've been lucky to have the inspector at that time was a very good person, he managed to save them, and they escaped to go to Ruhengeri, to go to stay in Ruhengeri. It was very, very traumatic as well.
Ubwo twari babiri, ni babiri b'ubwoko bw'abatutsi twari tugiyeyo. Hanyuma aho turi mu Ruhengeri twaje kubona umuntu w'umugiraneza aratubwira ati hari ahantu barimo gukora ikizame cyo kwiga iby'iposita, mubishoboye kubera ko mubuze akazi mushobora kujya kugikora mukareba yuko mwajya ku ishuri ntimwicare. Ubwo rero twaje kugenda dukora icyo kizame, turagitsinda. Noneho ubwo tujya kwiga, iryo shuri ryari ku Gisenyi, tujya kwiga, yari amezi 10 tujya kwiga ku Gisenyi. Hanyuma turangije iryo shuri ry'iposita, ubwo twabonye akazi mu iposita i Kigali. Urumva baca umugani ngo umwanza gucira kobo Imana igucira kanzu. Twahise tujya gukorera i Kigali aho gukorera mu cyaro.
So once they were in Ruhengeri, they found a person who helped them, who taught them, because there they were without a job, they were wondering what to do. So they found someone who taught them. They are doing a national exam for to be able to work in the post office. So she took the exam with her friend, and they kind of pass it, and then after they had to go for training to be able to work in post office, and they did a 10-month training, and after that they been offered a job to work in post office, main post office in Kigali. So it was a very good thing that happened to them.
Ubwo naje kugira umugisha nkora amezi 6 muri poste. Hanyuma umukuru wa banke do Kigali aza kubona ko nkora neza, aza kumpa akazi, atuzaze kubera ko muri leta baduhaga amafaranga make, atuzaze gukora muri banke yacu. Ati ho duhemba neza ati uzaba ubonye umugisha wo kuzamuka mu buryo bw'amafaranga. Ubwo nagiye gukora muri Banque de Kigali.
Okay, so she worked in the post office for 6 months, but after the director of the Bank of Kigali, she's been approached by the director of Bank of Kigali and offered her a job to come to work for the Bank of Kigali, and then she left the post office to go work in the bank, which was a very good promotion as well.
Ubwo yari umwaka w'igihumbi kimwe magana cyenda mirongo itandatu n'icyenda, noneho nza gukora mbona amafaranga igihumbi kimwe magana cyenda mirongo irindwi, njya gushaka ababyeyi banjye Bugande kuko nari narumvise ko baba mu ikambi yitwa Nshungerezi. Ubwo naje gufata imodoka njya gushaka ababyeyi banjye aho bagiye. Ubwo nari maze imyaka 10 ntababona, naratandukanye nabo imyaka 10 yarishize. Naje kubabona rero nsanga bari mu buzima butari bwiza, nuko ngerageza kubagirira neza. Bari muri twatuzo tw'impunzi, ngerageza kubakira, ngerageza kubasigira amafaranga yo kubaka, kugura amata yo kunywa. Nuko ndagaruka mu kazi. Hanyuma ikibabaje igihe nagombaga gusubirayo muri 71, data yahise apfa mu mezi ya mbere ya 71. Agahinda karanyica cyane kubera ko ubwo nari mubonye rimwe kuva twahunga.
So now that Rosalie was working and she was starting having some money, she started thinking about looking for her parents, because she had heard that they went to Uganda. And then she went in 1970, she went to Uganda after 10 years being separated with her parents. She went to look for them in Uganda. She's been told that they were in a refugee camp somewhere there. And then she found them. They were of course in a refugee camp. They were living a very difficult life. So she tried to help with everything because she had a little bit of money now. She tried to build them a little house to stay in. She buy them food and everything. And then she left them there still in Uganda. She came back to work, and she was planning to go back the next year. But sadly, her dad passed away before she could see him again. So she saw him once after being separated with him. So it was a very sad time.
Nyuma yaho nagiye kureba aho bashyinguye data, kuko ntabwo byari byoroshye kugenda nihuta ngo mushyingure. Icyo gihe nta moruge zari zihari, umuntu yahitabaga Imana bagahita bashyingura. Ariko nagiye yo kubasura, ndagaruka. Ubwo mama we yari akiriho nabo tuvukana. Hanyuma nza kugaruka, ariko ubwo nkora muri banke nari nahahuriye n'umusore, nuko mbese tuza gupanga ubukwe. Ubwo mu kwezi kwa 6 71 niho nagize mariage, nubaka urugo. Ubwo nyuma yaho nagiye njya kureba ababyeyi rero uko bisanzwe. Mama yaje kwitaba nyuma, ariko nari naragiye njya kumusura.
So in a minute, okay, she went back to Uganda to bury her father. But in the meantime, while she was working at the Bank of Kigali, she met her fiance, and they got married. And she continued the life there, and continued to go visit the parents. And then they were her mom passed away later on, but she had the opportunity to see them often after that.
Rero tumaze kugira mariage, twarakoranaga I Kigali, ariko baza kuduha promotion. Umugabo aza kuyobora banke do Kigali mu Ruhengeri. Turahaba 72 73 nko mu kwezi kwa kabiri tugiye tubona ibaruwa ya Colonel Kanyarengwe ivuye muri Sirote Nationale iduha amasaha 28 ngo tube twahavuye, kandi nta motifo tubonye, tutazi icyo tuzize, ubwo tuza guhambira tuzi Kigali.
So life continued with now her husband. They even obtained promotion. Her husband had a promotion to go be the director of the Bank of Kigali in Ruhengeri. So everything was going well until in 1973, they received a letter from the one Colonel Kanyarengwe was one important person at that time who sent a message telling them that they give you 24 hours to leave your job and to leave to find somewhere else to go because they were Tutsi, the persecution.
Go hashize amezi 2 gusa tugeze Kigali, nibwo haje rero noneho ko abatutsi bahagarikwa ku mirimo, liste zirakorwa, liste bazomeka ku nzugi zaho bakora, ku biti hanze. Nuko ubwo n'umugabo wanjye yararimo aza kwirukanwa mu kazi, aza mu rugo, ariko noneho uwo mugabo bakoranaga wamwangaga cyane aza kumushakisha ngo amwicishe mu rugo. Inshuti ya bombi iburira umugabo wanjye iti barakwica, nuko nibwo yaje gutoroka. Abazungu b'inshuti ziwe baramutorokesheje, baramwambutsa bamujyana kuri Goma, sigara mu rugo n'umwana w'imfura twari tumaze kubyara. Hanyuma yaho ubwo umugabo wanjye yasiga abwira inshuti yiwe ati ndagiye, ariko ukora uko ushoboye umuryango wanjye urebe uko wawungezaho kuri Goma.
When they started, they were starting by making a list of every Tutsi who was working in the public administration in an important post to be taken to leave their jobs, that no Tutsi was anymore allowed to work, and then even her husband lost her job. She went to Kigali before him after he came also to Kigali, but they were looking to kill him. They didn't like a person who was working with him who didn't like him at all, betrayed him. He wanted to have him killed, but someone who was a friend of both of them told him the plan, and then he managed to escape to go to Congo. Someone helped him to escape to Congo. He went to Goma, but he told a friend of them to take care of his wife, because they had a baby then. They had a newborn, the firstborn. So he tried to arrange for them to follow him, his wife and the child.
Iyo nshuti yiwe yaje kunshakira ikamyo yajyaga gutwara byeri ku Gisenyi, mu ikamyo aza kumfata n'umwana, atwuriza ikamyo atujyana ku Gisenyi. Ubwo umuntu yaragendaga ibintu akabisiga mu nzu uko byakabaye, ntacyo uri butware, ntacyo uri bugire ubute, kireka wenda akavarisi karimo amaranje y'umwana. Nuko turagenda, tugeze ku Gisenyi, uwo mushoferi yarazi abantu bambutse abantu mu makoro, amakoro n'ahantu hagati ya Gisenyi na Goma, ahantu hari amakoro nta mazi ahari, hatandukanijwe n'amabuye ava mu birunga. ubwo mu ijoro niho umuntu yaje kumfata nko mu masaha 8 z'ijoro, aramfata mpetse umwana aranyambutsa. Ubwo naje gusanga umugabo ahantu bari bambwiye bacumbitse ku hoteli hari, ubwo tuza kubaho ngaho. Twahabaye nk'igihe cy'amezi 3. Noneho abazungu bakoranaga n'umugabo wanjye muri Banque de Kigali baza kudushakira imirimo i Bujumbura. Ubwo rero niho twaje kujya tubona akazi, turatangira turakora.
So a friend of them helped them to helped Rosalie with the baby to go join her husband in Goma. So they had to go, he has to take them to find a truck that was carrying beers so they could go inside and nobody can know they were inside. So they went to Gisenyi. So after they had to cross over to the border to go to Goma. So they had to cross at night, 2 a.m. at night. And so they cross, they managed to cross safely. They get to the other side. They get reunited with her husband. And then once they were there, friends who wanted to help looked for a job for them in Bujumbura, and they moved to Bujumbura. They left Goma, Congo, to go to Bujumbura to work.
Bujumbura rero twahamereye neza, turakora twembi, tuhabyarira kuko umwe yari yaravukiye mu Rwanda, tuhabyarira abandi bana 5. Barimo Diane uraho kuri Zoom ariwe Bucura. Hanyuma tuza kumererwa neza, ariko nza kugira ibyago, aza kwitaba Imana mu 1989. Uwo mushinga ntahe wanjye ku rupfu rutunguranye. Ubwo nabwo birankubita, hamwe n'ibyo nari naravuyemo byose, urumva ko ntagize urugendo rworoshye.
So once they got into Bujumbura, they settled down, they had jobs, everything was going good. So they had 5 more children, including Diane, who's here. Diane is the last born. So life was going very good, and they were having jobs, and everything was going perfectly. But sadly, something really horrible happened again in 1989 when Rosalie lost her husband, who died suddenly. And this was really heartbreaking. On top of what she have lived in Rwanda, this was really difficult.
Icyambabaje cyane nuko cyane yakundaga FPR, kuko hari haratangiye kuba ibiganiro, ariko ntabwo byakunze ko arugeramo. Nabwo byagiye bimbabaza cyane ukuntu yabiharaniraga, ntiyashobora kurugeramo. Ariko ubwo Front Patriotique ifashe ibohoje igihugu, ihagaritse Genocide, ubwo naje gufata abana ndabatahana. Kamemu naho nari jyenyine, ariko naragerageje ndabatahana mu Rwanda nk'abandi banyarwanda bose. Ariko ngo aho umutindi yanitse niriva, kuko nasanze nyine abavandimwe biwabo mugabo barashize, abiwacu barashize, hasigaye mbarwa. Byari bibabaje cyane, ariko nta kundi, ntabwo yari jyenyine. Nagerageje gusangira umubabaro n'abandi mpasanze. Ubwo rero nabayeho muri ibyo byose. Nawe wabuze abawe muri Genocide yakorewe Abatutsi mu 1994 baho. baho kuko urumva inzira naciyemo ni ndende ariko mbaho nawe baho ntuheranwe n'agahinda haracyari ibyiringiro mubyare muheke naho igiti cyatemwa kirongera kigashibuka mugire amahoro y'Imana.
So Rosalie can recall of her husband being very patriotic. He loved the country. He was a member of RPF. He was doing everything for to be able to go back to his country, but unfortunately, he didn't get to go back. But after the victory of RPF in 1994, Rosalie took her children and they went back to Rwanda. It was a really sad experience because once she got to the country, everyone that she knew was already, they were dead. The people from her husband's family were, killed, and from her own family, they were being killed during the 1994 genocide. It was really difficult and hard to experience. But also now she finishes by telling everyone who lost a loved one during the 1994 genocide to be strong, to be resilient, that the better days are ahead. So she finishes on that note. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really vulnerable and brave. And thank you for sharing that story with us. So thank you to Rosalie, Melissa. And now we are going to hear a short poem reading by Daddy de Maximo Muisira Mitali.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I try my best to translate my poem in English, but I couldn't because sometimes Kinyarwanda is really, really difficult to translate everything for other languages. So I'm really sorry. I'm going to read my poem in Kinyarwanda. The name of my poem is Akira Ijambo Ndatashye. Semure yabasemurira ni igitekerezo n'inkuru nanditse ku mubyeyi wari ubonye ko bagiye kubica hanyuma agasohoka mu bwihisho kugira ngo atamwicana n'umwana we, noneho agahitamo kwitanga kugira ngo we bamwice ariko batamusanze aho yihishe kugira ngo abashe kuramira ubuzima bw'umwana. Translation, then komeza mu poem.
The poem is about a parent who was hiding with his child, and then they were about to kill them both, and the parent had to give his life for the child. So the poem is all about that, someone who's a parent who gives his own life for his child.
Akira ijambo ndatashye. Ndagiye simbishaka urasigaye ngo batagushaka ngutaye mu buvumo utavumburwa ariko kuba uriho ndiho. Twihishe hamwe nguhisha ko ngiye ngo uzashishe ntakiriho, nubwo mpindwa n'ubwoba ubwema ndabujyanye. Pfuye nemye mpagaze nicwa nshiriwe mu maso ariko singuciriye ishyanga. Inkuba irakubise amaraso aramenetse inkota nyinjiye ntuje, kuko nzi aho ngusize igumira umwana wanjye ntawe uhagusanga, isi n'abayo bahugiye.
That you are muted.
Should I start again? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Wait. Akira ijambo ndatashye. Ndagiye simbishaka urasigaye ngo batagushaka ngutaye mu buvumo ngo utavumburwa ariko kuba uriho ndiho. Twihishe hamwe nguhisha ko ngiye ngo uzashishe ntakiriho, nubwo mpindwa n'ubwoba ubwema ndabujyanye, pfuye nemye mpagaze nicwa, nciriwe mu maso ariko singuciriye ishyanga. Inkuba irakubise amaraso aramenetse, inkota yinjiye ntuje, kuko nzaho ngusize mwana wanjye igumiraho, ntawe uhagusanga. Isi n'abayo bahugiye kuri njye, ariko nanjye mbahaye wose barawikwije, nako bari kuwugabana, ndavuga umubiri wanjye. Ndize nabaye intero, umubabaro wanjye ntuhagarika itero, igumira mu mwana wanjye nawe uhagusanga, reka ngende nibashirwa bararuhuka, ngiye naniwe nabahaye umubiri wose, na roho yanjye iri gukora yishanye nawe. Nguhanure ngenda simpisemo kwicwa, simbyakiriye ntibikwiye, singiye kuko abagome niko babigenje, ubuzima nk'ubu ngubu, urupfu nk'uru nguru rw'iminota nk'iyi ngiyi, iminota iri kumputa nk'utaravutse nk'abandi, ariko ijisho ryanjye uwo rirebye ntazanyibagirwa iteka. Va mu buvumo ukuri ukore, kora wemye, hitamo neza uzananirwa ndabizi, ntuzakundwa udatunze, ntuzatunga utavunitse, nutavunika ntuzivura ibikomere. Uzakire nkanjye ugwize ubukungu mu mutima, intero yawe yange kwica, uce bugufi mu kanga, mu rwango no kwiheba ubigendere kure. Ntuzate umwanya wawe isi n'abayo niho bakubonera, njye ntabishaka ariko nshatse kuba umugabo cyane, niyo mpamvu ntanze ubuzima bwanjye. Simba ari ngo nzakurerere, sinanze kugutahira ubukwe, nubyara uzirerere, wirinde guta abawe, ubakunde iteka, ujye urwana ishyaka kuryana no gushyashyariza byirinde. Uzakundwa kuko ufite icyo utanga, uzangwa kuko nkuraza ubutwari, uzatwara ingoma yawe, wirinde iz'abandi, kandi uba umukaraza mwiza uzahirwa. Iwacu dukunda abacu uko bameze kose, ntuzabe nyirabuheri, ngo kuko ubu ngubu utunze, uzazirikane ko kubaho kwawe bivuye mu gitambo cy'urukundo. Ngiye utantumye ndahamagaye ngo nicwe, ariko ngusize kandi ndi kubaseka cyane, kuko igihe cyacu njye nawe mwana wanjye twagikoresheje neza. Ntabwo nitabye Imana nk'uko babivuga, kuko ndishwe. Ntawitaba Imana ngo wicwe kano kageni. Simemutse kuko ngutaye ngubeho, ntawitaba Imana aciwemo kabiri, ntawitaba Imana ateba igisongo, ntawitaba Imana yishwe urubozo, ntawahitamo kwitaba Imana muri izi nzira. Mpisemo gutaramira Imana, niko intore zigenda. Izi saha ndi kuvumwa, niswe amabi yose ngo ukunde ubeho, bigumira mu bwisho mwana wanjye, niko bigenda. Ndaruhuka neza, ngiye utantutse ni mahire, kandi uzabyirinda iteka. Niswe ikigoryi ntuzagoryamye, ndi kwitwa icyo ntazi kitumva, uzumvira umutima wawe. Niswe inyenzi inzoka, inyegamo yawe izaba amahoro kuri bose. Ndatobwe ntabishaka, ariko urupfu ruzakubera urumuri. Imyaka ni myinshi kandi uko ikura nibwo uzankumbura, uzakunda u Rwanda, wakira amateka, ukora yawe, ntuzarebe umunabi, uzanga inabi, uzasuzugurwa na benshi, n'uwawe ntazagutinya, uzacunaguzwa henshi, ntuzaca inshuro, ahubwo uzigabira amajeni. Uzabyaza umusaruro duke uhawe, wirinda kwiha iby'abandi, nunabironka ukandagira abo musangiye amateka. Ngiye ntakuriye ntuzarye uwo mwakoranye, ntuzacire uwo mwasangiye amata, uwayaguhaye n'uwo mwayashakanye. Reka njye nyacibwe, ni igitambo cy'amahoro i Rwanda. Mbyemeye ntatuje, ariko mata yanditswe ni iyi ngiyi, nawe uzandika ibyawe mu mateka. Kwicwa ndishwe, gutobwa birabaye, kubabara ndabijyanye, ariko nawe bizagusura. Amateka y'1994 muri Jenoside yakorewe Abatutsi ntazasibangana, n'inkovu ntizizasibama. Ariko uzasiga ubuvumo wubake heza hawe n'aho abandi, ariko uzasiga ubuvumo uvome kw'iriba rikwegereye, kandi uzava mu buvumo ugabira abandi. Iki gihugu cyiza kiratuje singituye, iki gihugu kirakeye ngo mugiture, uru Rwanda rurakeye ngo muminuze. Iki gihugu mugiture musangire byose, iki gihugu nudatura simpari ngo musunike mwana wanjye. Ahanjye haraha, ahawe niho hakenewe. Ijambo ryawe rizagutura iteka, ariko ibikorwa byawe nibyo bizacyubaka. Mumirije ntuje, nakiriwe n'umwami 1994. Uwawe ubu ari ku isi, nushaka uwanjye uzabikorere, bitinde nabyo uzabigeraho. Kuko unyumvise neza, ihanagura amarira uhaguruke, urire utaboroga, nanjye ndabyirinze. agahinda kazakura buri munsi ntikamenyerwa urakivura. Ngaho rero kibondo cyanjye kura, akira ijambo ndataye. Murakoze.
Daddy's a very accomplished man. He has a lot of things on the go. He's a fashion designer, a filmmaker, a journalist, a motivational speaker, an author. In fact, he's going to read a portion from his book right after our guest, our speaker. So we're going to transition into our keynote speaker right now. Kosole Nishimwe is going to take over the next portion. Kosole is an author, a motivational speaker, and a survivor of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi people in Rwanda when she was 14 years old. She suffered physical and emotional torture during her 3 months in hiding, and miraculously, by the grace of God, survived with her mother and her younger sister. Today, Kosole is a committed speaker on the genocide, a defender of women's rights, and an advocate for other genocide survivors. Kosole also released her memoir, Tested to the Limit, a genocide survivor's story of pain, resilience, and hope. And today she is going to share with us. Thank you so much, Kosole.
Thank you so much, Larissa, for your kind introduction. I hope you can hear me well. I want to make sure you hear me well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I want to thank you all for the community of Calgary for inviting me here tonight to commemorate and remember our loved ones we've lost in 1994, genocide against the Tutsi. I want to thank you all for being here. But before I begin, nagira ngo nkubwire mama Diane wakoze cyane kuduha ubuhamya bukomeye, ni ukuri uri intwari, nagira ngo ngushimire cyane, wakoze cyane. Imana igikomeza ibane nawe kurindi, wakoze cyane. Thank you, Daddy, also for your powerful poem and everything you do. Really, I want to thank everybody, the survivors who are here, Inhore, turi kumwe, and everyone else who is here with us to remember our loved ones we've lost in 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. It's not easy, as you've heard from Mama Diane, from her testimony. It's not easy to share everything you've endured during that period. But I feel like it's important for us to share this because especially for the next generation to know what we've gone through during that time. And that's also the reason why I've written my story in the book called Tested to the Limit, a genocide survivor story of pain, resilience, and hope. I was hoping that, including everyone else who have written stories, we want to make sure that the people, our loved ones we've lost, are not forgotten. And also the memories we've shared and the history. It's a history for our country. And I feel like it's important that we, especially nowadays, we see the last stages of the genocide denial. We see the increase of people who are denying what we've gone through at that time. And we want to make sure that the truth of what happened is told to the world so that we can continue to preserve the memory of what happened during that time in 1994, genocide against the Tutsi. The genocide happened when I was young. I was 14 years old, a young lady in a western province of the country. I was still young. I was hearing, when I was hearing the testimony Mama Diane was sharing, the school actually she went, my mom went to the same school too. She used to tell me the stories of Marie-Jeanne, which is the same name as my mom. And she went to the same school, and I was hearing the stories from the school I used to hear from my mom as well. So, I grew up in the western province of the country. Now it's called Karongi district. So from parents who were teachers, and And I was very fortunate that I had great parents. I was very cherished child in my household, and I had siblings. We're from age ranging from 14, 11, 9 years old, 7 years old, and 16 months old. I would say that where in my household, I was very, very fortunate that my parents showered me with love, and along with my siblings, I saw my parents going to work every day, loving their job and taking care of every child who went in their arms and in the school. And they showed me how to love, to care for people every day, despite the fact that they were going through persecution because of being Tutsis. But at the same time, they managed to give me the love that I needed as a child. I'm truly grateful for that. But I never imagined that I would go through what I've gone through at that time in 1994 at the age of 14, when I still needed to be loved and cherished and cared for. Like everyone else, of course, we were able to be forced to go into hiding for 3 months, which was horrible. We had to face unimaginable horrors. And at that tender age, that my small mind, my small body, that couldn't bear what I was hearing, what I was facing at that time. But like many others, I had no choice. I had to face that. I had to go through that every single day for those 3 months, and had to seek refuge in every place that I could find, alongside with my parents, my mom and my sister. But the first, in my area where I was born at the time, where I grew up in the current district. So at that time, they used to call it Commune Malanza, so which was the old ways of calling the area at that time. So there were many people who gathered at the communal office at that time, hoping to seek refuge there. And unfortunately, those people who were there at that time were told to go to the stadium, in Gatwara Stadium in Kibuye, now, which is an area where we have a memorial of so many Tutsis who were murdered in that stadium, and including many of my family members, people who were friends, people I knew very well. So a lot of them, many families were murdered there. So it was one of the horrible thing happened there. So even a person who escaped from that area is just it's a miracle. There's some stories of people, including some of my friends, who were able to leave the stadium, and which was very hard for them to escape there. So I at the time, alongside with my parents, we were trying also to go to the stadium, but we decided not to go there because my mom, somehow I always feel like it's a voice from God that told her maybe to not keep going to the stadium, following the crowd. And we decided to go to a family friend, so to hide there. And during that period, you never knew how people's heart changed. You never know who was kind. You never knew how things were going to be, because everywhere they were saying Tutsis must be killed. Even from babies, everyone somehow allowed themselves, the majority, I would say majority of extremists, Hutus, allowed them to, to carry that hatred against the Tutsi because of the radio. Many of you know RTLM, Radio, RTLM, which was also a platform that was used to incite the hatred towards the Tutsis. As a young person at that time hearing the radio, I couldn't understand how adults would allow, would just, mocking their fellow human being because of who they were. I couldn't understand why they allowed themselves to become so horrible to that extent. So, and at that time, of course, we had to go to the family friend, and they kept us for a few days, but then they refused to keep us any longer. So then we had to leave the home and seek refuge other places. And I remember April 15th, the early morning where we're hiding in the sorghum plantation of close to the river. There were many Hutus who were already going to work. They used to call it going to work, going to exterminate Tutsis. So they started going around shouting and, the songs of hatred against the Tutsi. And then also the slogans which were used at that time to dehumanize Tutsis and calling us cockroaches and snakes. I remember at that time where we're sitting in the middle of sorghum plantations, and these people were calling us cockroaches, wherever you are, show yourselves. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing in my ears. And I couldn't understand, I couldn't explain what I felt in my body, and the pain and the fear of hearing those excruciating, the excruciating pain that I felt within hearing those words coming from those people. And alongside with my parents sitting in the middle of sorghum plantations, we were praying. I couldn't, the image of my dad being scared. As a kid, you always feel like your parents are the ones protecting you, being with you. But then to see the image of my father where he was sitting and scared, not knowing what to do. And his sister, alongside with all of us siblings, with my siblings, my mom, the only person who was strong enough to tell us to be strong was my mother. And she said, keep praying within your hearts, keep praying within your hearts. And I could see my dad and my mom looking at her and at him and telling him to pray within his heart. It's hard for me to get rid of that image in my head because the way my dad was my best friend. My dad, he was a very beautiful human being that anyone would wish to have in their lives. My dad, not because he was my dad was the most, he was one of the most incredible, kindest human beings I've ever seen in my life. And to see him in that position where he was at that time, it's hard for me now to think about. So, and as the killers all, were shouting and trying to get us, and we came out in the bushes and trying to be together the same way my mom was telling us to. And the killers they were carrying machetes, they were armed with machetes and clubs and all other weapons, and with banana leaves on their waist, because they want to show that they're, powerful, they want to exterminate the Tutsis. And I remember, seeing them, and I couldn't even look at them because of the fear that I was carrying in my heart. They were already to me, like animals, they were scared to even look at. So my dad, they took everything he had, and then we had to figure out some other places to go to hide. That day is one of the beginning of the scary moments that I was going to endure during those 3 months during the genocide against the Tutsi. And the killers let us leave, and there were roadblocks everywhere, and we had to figure out places to go to hide. And because there was a young man who already told my dad that we could not be able to find places to hide because there were roadblocks everywhere, there were killers all over the place. And we decided to, of course, climb the hills and figure out where to go, which home could take us in. And my dad was holding my younger brother in his hands. And we decided to, when we reached to that home, my dad decided to run in a different direction, and they followed him. The rest of us, we went in the house, they took us in, and we had to hide in the ceiling. Later on that day in the evening, we heard the killers coming outside, because where we were hiding at that time, in that home, they had a small bar outside, and killers, after killing people, they were reward themselves with beer, and they were just having conversations of people they have murdered. And you couldn't believe how people were happy to talk about how they murdered their fellow human beings, especially that these are the people they knew very well. These were people who have taught their kids in school. They shared meals. They went to the weddings together, to churches, and now they're sitting and happy. They have murdered them. They have destroyed their homes. They have taken their belongings. I couldn't believe what my ears were hearing. And when I was hearing them, I heard them talking about how they have murdered my dad. It was one of the worst the first worst day of my life to hear my dad, my best friend, the way these people were talking. They murdered him simply because of who he were, not because there's anything he did to them. And this is someone who taught their kids. This is someone who woke up every day, going to work, hoping that he can give a smile, a knowledge to someone's life, to a child's life, so that they can get a better future. But now they took his life alongside many other Tutsis simply because he was a Tutsi. I couldn't believe what was going through these people's minds. Of course, it was hard as a young person. I cried, with my mom, holding each other, with my siblings, and they couldn't hear. It was me who was hearing it, and my mom. Of course, they were young to pay attention to everything. And we kept hiding. Those 3 months, we've seen unimaginable horrors, the things that I would never wish for anybody to go through. Every survivor, whenever you hear a survivor story, you hear a horrible thing happen to them. You hear everybody has gone through unimaginable horrors. There are survivors who could not even find the words to describe their pain, to describe every journey they have gone through. It's horrible because it's hard to even, go there and be vulnerable. So for me, when I think about it, it's hard for me. And at that time, I remember my mom had to carry me and my siblings, whoever, neighbors, people that she thought maybe would be good people or our friends, maybe of our family. And many of them refused. Instead of helping us, they called killers, or they would just, refuse to help us. Or they would even tell us the most horrible things that as if we were no longer human beings. So I remember one time, and we went to this home, and it was a rainy season, and it was, muddy, and we had to go through the bushes, avoiding going to the streets because there were roadblocks everywhere. As kids, laying down in the bushes, you couldn't, it's harder to even comprehend that now you are not allowed to go to your home. You are not allowed to do anything normal like everybody else. The only thing you have to do is to just evade being killed every single day. And I remember my mom one time, she took us to a home when we go through the bushes and figure out to a home we are going to ask for refuge. And we knocked at the door of this home, and the mother of the house, at that time she was there with her children, and the husband was not home, and the husband was actually killing people at the roadblock with other killers. And as we were begging, knocking and begging, and the kids realized it was my mom. So they heard her voice and recognized my mom's voice. And they begged their mother that it was, their teacher, please help our teacher, mom, please help our teacher. As they kept begging, the more they kept begging, their mom, was able to help and open the door. So we lay down a little bit, and at least we can rest a little bit. And it was just because of the kids. It wasn't because of their mom. Because their mom hated Tutsi from the beginning. He even said that to us, that he never loved Tutsis in his whole entire life. And he said, even my husband, if he comes and sees you, he will murder you. He won't even let you go. So, and to show you, because my story is a long story, you can read in the book. And there's another place we went. I remember because they were very good friends of my family for so many years. And we went, they were living in a house where they were overlooking a high school. And it's called the Groupe Scolaire de Rwanda. It's TTC now, they call it TCC. And I went there after the genocide, one of the high school I went to after the genocide. And I remember because I was living there overlooking that high school, because there were many killers there. There was a road there where there were many roadblocks there. And as we were knocking the door, hoping that he will open the door and can enter the house. And when he came outside, of course, we could overhear him talking inside, maybe with his wife. And as he came outside, instead of helping us, because there was a killer who was standing there, he was armed with a machete and a club. And, you know, and when we talk about the club, it was a wooden, very thick wooden with nails on top. And they used to call it Nhabongane Yunganzi. Maybe I will loosely translate it, no pity for our enemies. So, and then he came outside, he was wearing a towel around his waist, and he started calling the killers to come and help him. And as we kept begging him, my mom begging him, if he can't help, let us leave. He was mad, no one paid attention. I guess maybe to me, I say probably it was a miracle. And he went back inside, and this young man who was standing there was waiting, I guess, what he can do to us. Somehow, miraculously, when this man went back in the house, he said, okay, just leave. And then we have to go, you know, behind, you know, the houses and go back in the bushes and go figure out other places to hide. We were also, again, another, you know, time when we were discovered by killers, where we were hiding. My mom, they took my mom and my younger sibling, who was 16 months old, and the rest of us kids stayed there. And they were hoping that probably, you know, don't know what they were going to do. So to us when we were there. So, and then they took my mother. And as they took my mother, she was hoping one of the group of the killer group said that maybe my mom could give some of the belongings, you know, we left to one of our neighbor, so that maybe they can let her go. Maybe that neighbor could help her and us. So as they took her there, and the rest of us kids were wondering, I was comforting my siblings. I didn't know what to tell my siblings. And then as they took her there, of course, I was staying there. And this man in the household where we were at the time told me and my siblings to leave and go figure out where our mom was. And we left. And as we were leaving, going through the bushes and figure out, you know, where my mom was, and thinking maybe, I don't know, maybe they murdered her. As we reached to a home where they took us in, it was very, you know, a family that didn't have much, but they took us in and they sat us down and gave us food and gave us some fire because we were cold. We were just, you know, the whole night going there. And they started telling us what happened to our mom. So, and they said, your mom, killers refused to kill her, but your neighbor, of course, didn't help her. And they decided to put her to a neighbor, which was an old man who lost one leg. So they left her there. And then I told them we have to go find our mom. So early in the morning, we're able to go to where my mom was. And when she found us, of course, she couldn't believe we were still alive. And they took us, we were there and with her, and we prayed together. And of course, killers started planning how they were going to murder us and who they were going to murder. Of course, they decided to murder my brothers because they were saying, how come the boys are still alive? Because they have murdered a lot of men. But women, the reason why a lot of women were immediately not murdered, because rape was used as a weapon. A lot of them were brutally tortured and raped during that time. And they were held by so many killers. Many of you probably, I don't know if many of you here have read Dadi de Maximo book. You can find also where he talks about the torture and rape of women during the genocide against the Tutsi, how horrible it was at that time. And they took my brothers. That time came, and one of the person who came to take my brothers was somebody who grew up with my mom. And someone I couldn't believe, this is a person that their family were close to my family, and they were close to my maternal grandparents, because when I was growing up, I used to see them, being friends, being close. And now this is a man who came to kill my own brothers. And they took my brothers. One of them was always on my mom's back and chest, snatched away from her, all of us screaming. And as you can imagine how the scene was, it wasn't an easy, it was not easy. And it was hard, all of us begging to be taken and by refusing, and they took my brothers. I describe in my book that journey of how my brothers were taken, and they took them not to our destroyed home, and they slaughtered them and threw their bodies in the septic tank of our home. Our home was completely demolished by these murderers. So, and the rest of us was my mom, my sister, and we didn't know what to do. As you can imagine, from a parent, already kids being taken from her, it was an excruciating pain for her. Not easy. I'm not a parent, but for parents, you can imagine, what it feels like, when you have now a child being taken from you in a horrible way, what it feels. So, and we kept hiding, even though we didn't want to hide anymore. As I was mentioning earlier, how rape was used as a weapon, and many girls and women were brutally tortured and raped. And unfortunately, a neighbor who found us where we're hiding took me and raped me not too far from our home. And I had to go through, it was horrible, something that was hard for me to even talk about. There are so many horrible things I've gone through in the genocide, losing people and all that, but rape was the hardest thing that for me to even talk about, because the way it happened, horrible, and it was, for a young person, it wasn't easy for me. So I'm sure there are many, many survivors who carry that pain within themselves, but don't have the words, even the courage to talk about it, because it's not easy for them. And this was a neighbor, someone I knew very well. And but I was able to take myself to where my mom was. It wasn't very easy. The journey, as you can imagine, I wanted to die. I wanted someone to kill me. I didn't want to be alive anymore. So luckily, we were able to also found someone in a Muslim community who he does for the rest of our time in hiding, which was also the time that this man, everybody have heard stories of how this woman, my mom and her kids, they killed one, and now, what was happening to us. It was a story in the village. So And because a lot of people, many of you know that Karongi district is ranked among one of the area that lost many, many people in the country, including families that are completely wiped out during the genocide against the Tutsis. So, and it wasn't easy even for us to find a place to hide. And this man, who was kind enough, who didn't even murder anybody in the genocide, even participate at all in the genocide, took us in the house, and he said, "You've gone through the pain, you've gone through horrors throughout these 3 months. I'll never allow this to continue to you." And that's how we're able, myself and my mom and my sister. Of course, there were many, many incidents, things happen, and you will read in the book a lot of details of the things, how my sister was able to connect with us when she was hiding in another place and back with us, and so many things. And we were able to survive. And of course, the RPF stopped the genocide. That's how we're able to survive. Of course, there is a part also in the book that talks about Zone Turquoise, which was an area French people were at the time. So I was able to describe that in the book, how we encountered them too. And now the genocide, and then we were able to meet the RPF, and we're able to feel like now we survived. Now we're alive, even though we lost many people, my 3 brothers, my dad, now on both sides, my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, my extended family members, people, my classmates, the people that I loved, the families that I loved. And now the most horrific way that these people have been murdered. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for all of us. And my mom, now she had to take care of these 2 girls who left with her, and traumatized, and it wasn't easy for her. And then she had to go through that pain within herself of losing people, of what happened to me. And now later on, finding out that, I was HIV positive, later on that I found out, like many other Tutsis women now who had to bear, everything, that pain and a reminder of what I've gone through, and a constant reminder in my head that this is what happened to you. And to see other women who now have children from rape, it's a constant reminder, the pain, and some of them who have gone through even worse things that I've gone through, and to hear other stories and horrible stories that have happened to people, and the painful stories of other survivors, my fellow survivors who have gone through, who have lost their limbs and their arms, and now they have to see that every day and live with that every day of their lives. And others who have, families completely wiped out, now they stand alone. But when I look myself, I say, at least I have a mom. I can lean on her shoulder and cry on her shoulder. And despite the fact she carried the pain, but she's still there. She still shows me love, even in the midst of that pain we carry within ourselves. My mom is one of the most resilient among many women widows in Rwanda who survived, who are so resilient and courageous, and she was able to go back to teach even some of the kids of people who have done the most horrible things to our families. And now she showed them love instead of hate. She showed me that this is how you're supposed to live. Despite the pain, you shouldn't hate anybody. You should love everybody. But of course, it wasn't easy. But at the same time, I felt like I can't be like those people. So, and that really helped me a lot, because I learned that from her. And I was able to, of course, when I came in the United States, I was able to I was feeling like maybe I'm running away from the pain. Maybe I'll forget what happened to me. But there's no way you can run away from your pain. So it's within yourself. So then over the years, of course, I was trying hard, coping like any survivor. But at the same time, I had a voice within me that kept telling me to never give up. And of course, praying. But at the same time, the pain was too great to bear within myself. And now having the reminder of what happened to me as a young woman, I didn't know if I was going to have that smile, laughter that I had before, or even have the joy to love small things in life, or to embrace life again, like everybody, like how it was before. And now, thankfully, I went to therapy, which I'm so grateful for. And I had people who listened to me, gave me their kind ear to listen to me, even though I didn't even have the words, even the right way to describe the pain I carry within myself. But it helped me to open the door of starting a journey of healing, even feeling like now I can feel like a load was lifted off my shoulder. Now life is worth living. Now I feel like I started, writing in my journals, and which also became a book after, because my journals were part of helping me, but then they became a book, which I felt like it was necessary for me to share that journey with the world, with the people, so that we can help each other, and at the same time preserving the memory, at the same time making sure what happened is not forgotten. So I'm truly grateful that writing has been therapeutic for me, was cathartic for me. I was able to start to feel like I'm here for a reason. When I speak on behalf of young girls like me, like women who cannot speak for themselves, some of them who carry the pain even now, who cannot be able to find the courage to talk about it, even feel like the pain is too great to bear even now. The trauma is too, because trauma that really is still alive among many survivors. So, and for me, I feel like I'm here to, also be part of, making sure that I am, part of helping and contributing a little bit to the well-being of everybody, especially as survivors, helping us, each other, and making sure our stories are heard. So I'm one of the things that has helped me in my life, and that I always love to share with people, is that no matter what horrible circumstances you may face in your life, never lose hope. For losing hope is the beginning of your own self-defeat. I just want to leave you with this, and thank you very much for your kind attention, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Konsore. That was an amazing testimony. You're brave. We're so grateful that you are a survivor and that you're able to share this message of hope so vulnerably and really bravely too. And we're also really thankful for your parents' resilience through all of this. So thank you for sharing. Okay, next we are going to hear a reading from a book by Dadi de Maximo Misira Mitali right now.
Thank you so much. I'm going to read some pages from my book, but I wrote my book in French, and my team and I are working on English and other languages translations. Je voudrais lire quelques pages de mon livre intitulé Rwanda, un deuil impossible, effacement et traces. La vie raccourcie. Ce ne sont pas des cadavres anonymes qui se sont noyés accidentellement sans réseau. Ce sont des êtres humains qui avaient un nom, un prénom, un visage. Ils étaient Tutsi. Ils ont été jetés dans les rivières après avoir été torturés. Au-delà du simple décompte des cadavres, nous avons le devoir d'écrire leur supplice. Je me souviens de la mise à mort des Tutsi par noyade dans les rivières et les lacs du Rwanda. Je me souviens que certains ont été noyés alors qu'ils étaient encore en vie. Ils ont été jetés à l'eau, couverts de blessures, sans le moindre espoir de s'en sortir. D'autres ont été lancés dans des cours d'eau infestés des crocodiles. Des femmes ont été jetées avec l'enfant qu'elles portaient au dos. Et souvent, les membres d'une même famille ont été noyés tous en même temps. Les rivières et les lacs sont devenus des cimetières. Dans tout le pays, les cadavres jonchaient le sol. Ils étaient ramassés dans les rues, les ruelles, sur les sentiers et les collines, après être testés à la merci des chiens et rats et des rapaces. Puis, ils étaient jetés à l'eau. Ce sont des humains, ce ne sont pas des chiffres. Avant d'être noyés, les Tutsis ont subi une torture morale et physique qui leur faisait perdre toute capacité de résistance. Ils étaient frappés à coups de machettes ou de gourdins. Suppliciés, la victime demandait pardon. Elle appelait désespérément au secours. Elle criait, elle pleurait toutes les larmes de son corps. Le raccourci n'était pas une simple noyade. Avant d'être noyées, les femmes Tutsi étaient battues et déshabillées en public. Puis les miliciens Interahamwe, les militaires, les tuaient Hutus se les partageaient comme se partageait le butin d'une chasse. Ils les violaient à tour de rôle, bestialement, avec la volonté de le faire le plus de mal possible avant la mort. Quand la femme était à bout de force, son sexe à lambeaux, quand plus aucun tueur ne désirait abuser d'elle, il la tuait et l'abandonnait à l'agonie. Parmi ses frères et sœurs qui avaient subi le même sort, où il la noyé. Après le viol venait la mise à mort. Munis d'outils rudimentaires, gourdés, petites hues, massues, les Interahamwe assoiffés de ça massacraient les victimes pour les achever. Ils assuraient que personne ne survivrait. Ils frappaient tellement fort qu'on aurait dit qu'ils cassaient des pierres, alors qu'ils fracassaient des têtes, des articulations. Si la victime ne mourait pas sur le coup, les victimes étaient livrées à des souffrances que seule la mort venait soulager. Durant le génocide, on profitait de la nuit pour se déplacer vers des lieux qu'on croyait sûrs. La paix au ventre, préférant l'essentiel de tourner aux routes fréquentées, on enjambait le corps des victimes. Parfois, le sang coulait encore de leurs blessures. Elles agonisaient. Leur corps était encore chaud. Elles venaient d'être assassinées. Leur corps était atrocement mutilé. Je n'ai pas de mots pour décrire l'humanité des tueurs et les marques de torture que je vis sur les morts abandonnés le long des routes. On ne saurait évoquer le génocide des Tutsis sans décrire en détail le mode opératoire des tueurs. Depuis la nuit des temps, l'humain a fait preuve d'inventivité en ce domaine, mais force est de reconnaître que le processus d'extermination des Tutsis a connu ses propres caractéristiques et a été conduit avec une extrême cruauté en un temps record. De simples outils sont devenus avec une extrême cruauté à un temps record. De simples outils se sont devenus des instruments de torture et des armes d'élimination rapide. Des centaines de milliers de familles ont été décimées par des outils qu'elles avaient l'habitude d'utiliser pour les activités quotidiennes. L'une des pires tortures. Le viol collectif était commis en public. Les miliciens s'en prenaient brutalement chaque victime à tour de rôle, de là où nous étions cachés dans le ruisseau ou les marais. Nous attendions les nôtres hurler de douleur. Leurs corps étaient déchirés et souillés avant d'être tués. Et notre foi intérieure, nous mourions nous aussi petit à petit. Ceux qui criaient étaient nos parents, nos amis, nos connaissances. À bout de douleur, ils nous appelaient au secours, morts de peur. Nous reconnaissions leur voix, les noms. pour torturer davantage encore les victimes, les Interahamwe leur ordonnaient d'appeler leurs proches sans leur avoir fait savoir auparavant qu'aucun ne viendrait, puisque tous avaient été déjà tués. Ils citaient avec arrogance les noms, les lieux, le jour de leur mort. Depuis nos cachettes, nous devinions qui étaient les victimes et qui étaient leurs assassins. Pour les filles et les femmes, le viol était quasi systématique avant leur assassinat. Certains étaient pratiquement morts avant d'être noyés, humiliés, déshabillés, déshumanisés. Ils avaient perdu le goût de la vie, préférant mourir plutôt que de rester en vie. La mort était un soulagement. Les tueurs n'avaient pas honte de déshabiller une maman âgée devant ses enfants. Certains ont été abusés par des jeunes qui avaient été jadis leurs élèves. Mettre à nu une femme, une institutrice d'école en public, était en soi une torture inconcevable, une mise à mort programmée. S'ensuivait le viol, puis l'assassinat. Les corps profanés gissaient sur le flanc des collines, nus et dépouillés, étaient ramassés par des camions et jetés pour ne pas incommoder les tueurs par leur odeur et leur présence. La plupart étaient déversés dans les rivières. Quand on parle du nombre de noyés, on ne saurait avancer le moindre chiffre pour parler de tous qui ont été charriés par les cours d'eau. Je parle des victimes innocentes et de leurs morts atroces, sauvagement tués juste parce qu'ils étaient Tutsi. Il pleuvait ce jour-là. Les sentiers étaient couverts de cadavres et le sang coulait. Les routes étaient jonchées de corps que l'eau entraînait depuis les collines vers les vallées et les rivières. Le sang coulait partout et le corps qui n'était pas emporté pourrissait sur le flanc des collines. Le nerf d'une femme ne valait plus rien. Je le répète, l'humain ne valait plus rien. Le Tutsi, enfant, adulte ou vieux, ne valait plus rien. Sa vie ne valait plus rien, sa vie ne valait pas même cerf de rein qui peut toujours s'échapper et mettre fin à la poursuite. Pendant le génocide, nous étions pourchassés sans fin partout comme les plus nuisibles des insectes, et la mort venait nous chercher jusqu'à nos cachettes les plus secrètes et les plus reculées. De loin, on distinguait les cris des tueurs et les appels au secours des victimes. Après avoir tué, les miliciens pillaient et détruisaient les maisons. Ils ne voulaient pas seulement tuer avec leurs armes traditionnelles, ils voulaient effacer toute trace de la vie des victimes. Ils violaient les femmes Tutsi, ils les brûlaient, ils déchiraient tout jusqu'aux photos. Le génocide des Tutsis visait leur extermination totale. Quand tu apprenais la mort d'un des tiens et le nom de celui qui l'avait tué, on comprenait que les armes conventionnelles n'avaient pas été les seules à être utilisées. Les assaillants ne se contentaient pas de tirer sur la foule ou de lancer des grenades dans les salles remplies de personnes, des réfugiés Tutsis. Après les attaques, ils vérifiaient que leurs victimes étaient bien mortes. Ils les dévisageaient une par une et le survivant était achevé sans pitié. Ils les pourchassaient, ceux qui se cachaient dans les brousses, les bananeraies, les rousseaux et les papyrus. Si on attendait un coup de fusil isolé, on savait qu'un Tutsi venait d'être abattu à bout portant. Les victimes imploraient le pardon des tueurs qui ne leur accordaient jamais. La mort était partout. Le viol. Nous avons survécu au génocide, nous avons échappé aux machettes et autres tortures. Mais après avoir survécu au mal absolu, nous n'avons pas mettre fin à notre souffrance. De ce point de vue, c'est une défaite. Les rescapés ont gardé les séquelles que seuls peuvent comprendre. Certains mourront sans pouvoir s'en débarrasser. Elles sont liées au traumatisme qui nous ont accablés en 100 jours de mort. Le pays grandit, l'histoire reste. Le pays grandit, mais ceux qui ont vécu cette histoire la garderont dans leur cœur durant toute leur vie. Malgré le développement, les blessures saignent dans le cœur des rescapés à cause de ce raccourci dans lesquels ils ont été saisis.
C'est un chemin rempli de souffrances et de maux, douleurs mortelles, des innocents jetés dans les rivières et les lacs, déchirement du cœur et du corps pour nous qui avons connu et subi le raccourci qu'a été le viol collectif et public des mères, des jeunes filles, des hommes, des jeunes gens et des enfants. Être traîné dans un chemin rempli de souffrances oblige à refuser son propre corps qui a été complètement dégradé. On a été battu jusqu'à perdre l'ouïe, traité de tous les noms, humilié jusqu'à venir à nous haïr nous-mêmes. Nous avons été violés par des foules joyeuses. Nos cris de douleur se sont perdus dans le brouhaha de leurs cris de plaisir et de joie. Les viols étaient sales. Les violeurs étaient sales. Ils dégageaient l'odeur du sang de leurs victimes. On perdrait le goût de la vie. On mourrait intérieurement. L'image qu'on avait de soi n'avait plus rien d'humain. Il s'agissait d'une torture infligée par des hommes conscients de leurs crimes qui s'en prenaient à toi alors que tu criais jusqu'à perdre la force de te battre, jusqu'à ne plus pouvoir ni supplier, ni appeler au secours. Le monde, les gens, Dieu, plus personne ne t'écoutait. Tu te taisais. Tu pleurais intérieurement. Tu te laissais faire. Tu te laissais tuer. C'est mon histoire, même aujourd'hui, je n'ose y penser, car je me rappelle que ce que j'ai subi, la souffrance envahit tout mon corps et me ramué. Le corps et le cœur sont envahis, l'âme étouffée. J'avais 12 ans. La douleur a été tous mes organes pendant des jours, des semaines et des mois. Mes blessures qui avaient tant saigné pourrissaient depuis s'en échapper. Ma peau avait perdu sa sensibilité. Mon corps était mort, mon cœur mourait peu à peu. Je dégageais une odeur nauséabonde et j'étais le premier à le sentir. J'appelais les miens au secours tout en sachant qu'ils subissaient autant d'atrocités que moi. Aujourd'hui encore, quand je crie de douleur. Je me souviens que j'ai appelé mon père au secours. J'ai crié le nom de ma mère, de mes frères, jusqu'à ce que je me taise. Sans secours, sans espoir de réconfort. Le raccourci ne se résume pas au chemin de croix qu'ont subi les victimes du génocide perpétré contre les Tutsi. Il se réfère aussi à la vie très difficile que les survivants ont dû affronter après et qui comprend son lot de traumatismes multiples et successifs. Les conséquences de ces vices corporels et moraux semblent insurmontables. Tu te sens coupable et inutile, sans aucune raison de vivre. Les difficultés sont trop nombreuses, il te reste presque personne pour t'aider. Le survivant partage le même malheur et la même douleur. Souvent, dans tes pensées, seul face à toi-même, tu te demandes pourquoi les tueurs autour ont décidé de te laisser briser, mais vivant. Tu te dis que tu n'as plus aucune valeur sur cette terre. Rien n'est aussi douloureux que de ressentir à quel point les tueurs te méprisent et te haïssent. Comme si la mort ne voulait pas de toi. Tu es resté comme un déchet inutile à jeter. C'est pire qu'être mort et enterré. Tu n'es plus un être humain comme les autres. Les tueurs trouvaient que tu pues et la mort est un soulagement qui te refuse. Si on lit attentivement les témoignages des rescapés du génocide des Tutsi, on se rend compte que dans toutes les régions, ce chemin de croix était le long de chaque victime innocente pendant 100 jours. Les rescapés n'arrivent pas à tout dire. Certains ne disent rien et tellement des récits sont partis avec les morts. Des familles entières ont été décimées. Aucun survivant ne sera plus jamais là pour raconter ce qui est arrivé aux siens. C'est pour eux que j'écris ce que je connais par moi-même et ce qui m'a dit par d'autres survivants qui ont connu le même raccourci. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Daddy, pour partager. If you could put the title of your book in the chat so that we can take a look at it after this, that would be great. Okay, right now Diane Nwale is going to read the letter of support from the Jewish community and from Prime Minister Rachel Notley.
Thank you, Larissa. All right, I'm going to start with a letter from the Calgary Jewish Federation. On behalf of the Calgary Jewish community, we want to offer our deepest condolences and support to those who gathered on April 10th, 2022, to commemorate the 28th anniversary of the brutal and senseless Rwandan genocide against the Tutsis. While we are unable to physically join you today, please know that we are with you in heart and spirit. The Jewish and Rwandan communities have experienced very personally how easily baseless hatred can lead to the murder of millions. Every Rwandan testimonial from a time of hatred and Russian supremacy that culminated in a campaign of mass murder echoed the generational trauma the Jewish people experience to this day from the Holocaust. We know firsthand how important it is to preserve memory, honor survivors, and teach the lessons of our tragic history to young people, so that they understand the horrible consequences of systemic racism and genocide. Those who have suffered the consequences of bigotry must work together with others of like mind to protect and preserve the hard fought for peace that comes with respecting the basic human rights of us all. As Rwandan survivors and the descendants bravely tell their story, others will begin to understand the dangers and threats that atrocities such as these can have on a family, a community, a culture, a society. On this sad and meaningful day, we reach out in friendship with our common determination to fight racism and bias. We vow to teach our children to respect all people, regardless of race, religion, color, and nationality, and foster a society that celebrates our differences. Today, we join with you as we remember the victims of the Rwanda genocide against Tutsi. We stand with you in honoring those who survived. We walk beside you as we step toward a future when we can genuinely say never again. May our children know only peace. Signed, Lisa Libin, the Chair, Community Relationship Committee, and Adam Silver, the CEO. The second letter is from Rachel Notley, the leader of the Alberta New Democratic Party, NDP. I'm honored to join you today in commemorating the beginning of the Rwanda genocide in Rwanda. By gathering together to remember all those who lost their lives, their families, their communities, and so much more, we're able to share the sense of loss and heartbreak that still impact so many today. Coming together to remember allows us to take the time to reflect on not only the past, but on how communities may still carry the impact today and in the future. We share our hearts with the families of those who have lost their lives, experienced trauma, and lost aspects of culture and community. As I reflected on what it was I wanted to share with you today, I was struck by the theme of empowering the youth in the next generation, the children and grandchildren of survivors. I admire the strength, compassion, and empathy shown by finding ways to honor and celebrate the next generation, empowering them within their own vibrant community and beyond. I appreciate the opportunity to make this small contribution to this day. The courage and hope I see here are deeply inspiring as we seek to work together to build a life of dignity, respect, and security of all. It is truly an honor to speak with you. Thank you. And the next one is from the Prime Minister of Canada, Honorable Justin Trudeau. I will read in French and the English message will follow. Chers amis et chères amis, je vous salue chaleureusement toutes les personnes qui participent à la 28e commémoration du génocide contre les Tutsis au Rwanda. Cet événement constitue une occasion d'exercer notre devoir de mémoire envers les innocentes victimes de ce génocide survenu en 1994. Il est également à propos de diriger nos pensées et nos prières à toutes les familles et les proches de victimes qui doivent encore aujourd'hui composer la douleur et le traumatisme provoqués par ce triste chapitre de l'histoire de l'humanité. Ce génocide, comme tous les autres, nous rappelle tristement à quel point la division et la haine peuvent être dévastatrices. C'est pourquoi il faut poursuivre notre lutte contre l'intolérance et la discrimination afin de protéger les plus vulnérables et de faire de notre monde un monde meilleur. Au nom du gouvernement du Canada, je vous souhaite une cérémonie réussie et vous offre mes meilleurs vœux pour l'avenir. Cordialement, l'honorable Justin Pierre-Foulé. The English message. I would like to extend my warmest greetings to everyone taking part in the 28th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. This event is an opportunity for us to honor our duty to remember the innocent victims of the 1994 genocide. It is also a chance for us to direct our thoughts and prayers to the victims' family and loved ones who are still dealing with the pain and trauma of this terrible chapter in human history. This genocide, like all others, is a sad reminder of how devastating division and hatred can be. This is why we must continue to fight intolerance and discrimination so we can protect the most vulnerable and help them make the world a better place. On behalf of the government of Canada, I hope you have a meaningful ceremony and I offer you my best wishes for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, we are at the question and answer period. This is going to be facilitated by Dr. Glenn Ryland. So if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share, you can put it in the chat, or you can put the little hand raising emoji on your screen and we'll make sure to unmute you.
Thanks for allowing those of us who are not actually from the Rwandan community to be part of this, and I'm certainly one of those. And the theme this year on youth is really quite important, since I teach at the university and I teach specifically young people about these things. And I just, as you are writing your question or thinking about your question, just want to tell you why it's important for people like myself to be here. There's a Jewish writer whose name is Henry Greenspan. He wrote about what is it we're supposed to do as people who listen to stories from victims of genocide and mass atrocity. And he simply says, our job is to listen. That's our job. Our job is just simply to listen. And then those stories enter us and we can share them with our family and such. So that stories go further. And so the importance, and I understand from Dadi in his book, Dadi de Maximo, there is, sorry about that. One of his purposes is to get survivors to talk, but also for young people to know those stories. So those stories get passed on. So very important. And it's a real privilege to be here. So I want to say, I think it's Murakose. It's my desperate attempt at saying something in Rwanda. So if you write in Kenya, Rwanda, that's fine. We have a translator for those who want to know. And if you write in French, my French isn't that great, but we have people who can help with that too. So whichever you like. And please address your question to a specific speaker. So thanks to Rosalie and Console and Dadi for sharing, but maybe address the question to one of our speakers would be great, and then they can respond. Any takers here? I'm looking for some hands or some writing. Gabi.
Hi, Glenn. I have a question. I don't know if it's a personal question or not. So when in genocide, when it was happening, I don't know how old we were, but did you know what was happening? So what were you watching on TV?
Are you asking me, Gabi?
Yes, I'm asking you.
I have very strong memory of it. I was in my young adult years. I'd been married for about 10 years at that time. I guess I was sort of getting towards my middle adult years. I had 2 children already, and I remember being on TV, and for me, I didn't know much about Rwanda. It was quite sort of a shock to hear about it. It's kind of like what we're hearing from Ukraine today, although I knew a lot more about Ukraine being from Europe myself. So yeah, it was, and then not knowing how to interpret it. I had no tools for interpreting it. I didn't know anybody from Rwanda. So I think a lot of people were like me. They felt kind of lost as such. But maybe that's a question that's others could probably address better than me. I that was the beginning of my interest in Rwanda, to be honest with you. That's when it began to sort of become something that I began to care about and wonder about.
I kind of have another question related to the first one. Do you know if everybody knew what was happening? Do you know that could have done something, maybe collectively?
The problem is we looked away. We turned and we just looked a different way. I think this is the problem, is we see this over and over again in our history. Could something have been done? I don't know. I know it would be interesting to pass that on to our speakers. What could the world have done?
If everybody knew what was going on.
If they knew. I mean, this is the question we face today, right? With Ukraine. And are we doing enough? Gabby, I don't have an answer for you. Regine has a question. Maybe we'll turn there. Go ahead, Regine.
Yeah, for me, it's not a question, but a comment for Mama Rosalie for speaking to us about the whole history of the killings of the Tutsi people in Rwanda since the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and up to the illegitimate genocide in 94. I just wanted to, maybe for those who are not Rwandans, to understand how a genocide can make itself throughout the history, and that people think that there are small things. It's very interesting that we are referring to Ukraine because we are watching the killings happening now, and the world is watching, maybe with different reactions now as many countries are talking about it, and but people are still dying, and the killings are still taking place. I think the issue of not in my backyard becomes even more painful for us survivors, because it reminds us of how we were completely forgotten and left behind to fend for ourselves or die. So I just wanted to comment, Mama Rosalie, wakoze cyane kuduha amateka, and Console, I couldn't just imagine what it meant for you as a 14-year-old to witness all you had to see. And yet, both of you and plus the Dido Maximo, the resilience that we read through, we hear when survivors start to talk. I just wanted to commend you for being so brave, but also for being so generous to share your stories with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Regine. There's a comment in here in our chat from Brandy about reaching out to high school students, and students today are hearing more and more of these stories. And I've been involved with the Holocaust Symposium. I think we've reached over 80,000 high school students so far. tremendous importance there has been for in the Jewish community to share their stories. Of course, now so many years later, there's not many survivors left, and how important it must be. I wonder if maybe one of the speakers might like to comment on how do we get this message through to young people today? How do we reach young people so that they will hear these stories and come to understand them better? I appreciate the books. Actually, Console, I have your book now on my list of things to get and to see. And so, but what are your thoughts on that? How can we reach young people to hear this and to have these narratives come and be part of their understanding of the world? Any thoughts on that from our speakers?
Maybe I can say something.
Thanks, Console.
Thank you very much, Glenn. That's a very good question. So I think it's so important to bring the stories in the classrooms, especially the books in the classrooms, because I feel like learning, being educated about it helps a lot to make sure the young people learn what happened. So for me, I always appreciate when I get invited in schools, high schools and colleges, universities and all that. So I feel like it's important to bring those written books on the genocide against the Tutsi into the classrooms. I appreciate teachers who do that. And I think it's so important to do that so that the young people can learn. And I feel like that's the only way for me to make sure we educate the history of what happened. So that's probably my way of saying, respond to the question. So.
Thanks, Console. Importance then of being willing to share that story. And it's not easy, I'm sure, to share one story. I've had a few people from the Rwandan community come into my classes, and I know it's not easy. And my students are often stunned by the story. They don't even know how to ask a question afterwards because it hits so deep. But that's important. I think it's important for them to really sense that these are real people, real stories, and maybe in some ways, to Gabby's question, how I don't know what we could have done in 1994. That's probably another debate, but we can do something today to awaken people to hear these stories well. So yeah. How about Daddy or Rosalie? Do you have any thoughts on that about reaching young people well today? Daddy, you write quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to your book being written in English because my French is not that great. So, but any thoughts there?
Somebody needs to translate for her. Uneasy.
Yeah.
Mama Diane, ikibazo cyari ukuntu umuntu ashobora kuba yasangiza ibyabaye nk'ibyakubayeho cyangwa ibyabaye muri jenoside yakorewe abatutsi kubisangiza urubyiruko, ukuntu ni gute umuntu yagira kugira ngo urubyiruko narwo rumenye ibyatubayeho.
Nibaza ko ayo mateka bajya bayigisha mu mashuri nka history, uko bigisha histoire z'ibintu byabaye ahantu hose, niyo histoire byabaye mu Rwanda numva ko babyigisha abana mu mashuri.
Yes, she thinks as well that this should be spoken into, taught to inside the classrooms, inside like kids should learn about what happened to our country. They should have knowledge of what took place and what led to the horrible events to happen.
Sorry. Nko kuva mu 1959 ni urugendo rurerure rw'ubwicanyi 63, 73 kugeza muri 94. urumva ni ibintu mbese byagahereye mu muzi mu 1959. bikageza mu 1994 kureba urwo rugendo rw'ubwicanyi uko byagenze bakarwigisha amashuri.
So young people needs to know what happened, that all of this, like the final genocide happened gradually. It all started in like from 1959, 1963, the massacres were still happening to Tutsis, discrimination. It didn't happen overnight. It's something that has been planned, carried out, and over the years. Like young people needs to know that.
That's a reminder of how important it is to learn history. So thanks for that, Rosalie, and thanks, Anasi, for interpreting for us. I appreciate that very much.
Thank
There was a question or a comment, comment about the role of the UN in this, and it's a pretty complex question, but a question that's worth asking today as well. And I would recommend just simply reading Romeo Dallaire's book. Actually really spells out the failure of the UN in 1994 and how he was caught in the middle of it. He spells it out rather well and has been a Canadian voice for needing to do more. But that's much more extensive answer to the question. But that's probably a good place to start. But Ina, you had your hand up, but did you want to share something as well?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I actually wanted to make a statement, and on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Calgary branch and our community, we are humbled to be invited to Calgary's Rwanda community commemoration. I'm sorry. Of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. We thank the Rwanda Canadian Society of Calgary, the president, who is the Rwanda genocide survivor, and all the genocide survivors who spoke today. We stand with your people in this solemn commemoration and pray for innocent victims of the genocidal massacre. We commemorate the memory of the Rwandan genocide victims and honor the resilience and courage of the survivors. We share with you the need to educate and continue raising awareness about past and present atrocities, especially among our youth. We appreciate with all our heart that today's commemoration, you actually thought about people of Ukraine. And you started it with kind words of support for our people as the Russian regime is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine. It has been 47 days since Russia's ruthless full-scale war was launched against Ukraine, and Putin regime continues the deliberate slaughter of innocent civilians. It's not the first time the people of Ukraine has been under attack. Between 1932 and 1933, the Stalin communist regime orchestrated a famine genocide to undermine Ukrainian nation, identity, and spirit, and ethnically cleanse Ukrainians from vast territories by starving millions of men, women, and children. The horrendous atrocities were concealed and denied by Soviet Union, and today are being denied by the Russian Federation, which is committing the new genocide of innocent in Ukraine. We look forward to opportunities of meeting with members of your community and working together in raising awareness about atrocities and the importance of educating our youth so the history doesn't repeat. Thank you so much. And I want to tell you what's happening in Ukraine right now hasn't started 47 days ago, right? It started a long time ago. And in 2014, when Russian Federation occupied Ukrainian territory, Crimea, where I had my relatives who had to flee from Crimea, and then instigated the war in Eastern Ukraine, there was no strong response from the West. So Putin had all this time to prepare this full-scale invasion and slaughter that's happening today. It's not something that was planned in a matter of weeks. It was planned over years. And I think the West just didn't do enough, and they, they emboldened Putin, because he saw he could do anything. So he just continues moving as far as he can. And even though there are sanctions, there is strong support for Ukraine and military support. Is it enough? Is it enough to stop the slaughter? And how many more will have to die? So I really appreciate you inviting me here today. And I learned so much about what your people went through, and we would like to invite you to our future events and have you as speakers, so that we could continue raising awareness about what you went through and about the trauma and the importance of speaking against the hate that feeds that translates into this kind of violence. So thank you so much. And I apologize. It's very raw to me. My parents are in Ukraine, we are losing people that we know. So it's very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ina, for sharing that. And I think it's very important to see the larger picture. We've been reminded to look at it historically across time. And I think that's been really good today. But also to look at across people. In this month, the Armenians commemorate their genocide that started on April 24th, 1915, and the Turkish government sought to destroy them and push them into the desert. And this story has been told over and over again, these genocidal stories, and we need to know them, and we need to recognize them, and then we need to stand together and do something. So we really appreciate your voice here as part of this. Delene, I'm going to ask you to give the last question or comment, and then we'll probably move on from there, but thank you. Go ahead, Dylan. You have to unmute, I think.
Thank you. Okay. I just like to preface my question by saying that I hear all the stories, and I really appreciate everyone for coming out and speaking on, not only on behalf of all of us, but also just speaking out about your stories. I think they're really powerful. The one question I have is for my generation of Rwandans. I think it's really difficult to be constantly reading about genocide denial, and that rhetoric being not only put in our face, but fed to our peers who are not Rwandese. And I'm curious as to what everyone's thoughts are on how we carry the torch, or how we prepare to carry the torch to speak on these stories and also honor them and ensure that, our people are respected in the future, and that essentially the lives that were lost were not lost in vain. So I'm open to any comments, thoughts.
Okay, let me translate for Mama Diane. Diane, ikibazo ni arabaza nk'umujene, akavuga ati duhora dusoma abantu bagenda bahakana jenoside, atariko se nkatwe nk'abajene urabona n'iki twakora kugira ngo dukomeze duperpetre la mémoire y'abacu, kugira ngo abantu bo kuzajya baguma bahakana ibyabaye.
nk'uko nabivuze cyane abo bajene bagomba kubyigishwa bikava mu muzi, bikagira ku mpera yabyo aho jenoside yabaye, bagasoma ibitabo, hanyuma kandi nyuma y'ibyo ngibyo bakima amatwi abantu bahakana jenoside, kuko bazaba babona ibihamya. Iyo hari ibitabo, iyo hari izo story, iyo sinamenya ukuntu nababwira ko bajya no kureba mize y'ibintu aho kuntuza ku rwibutso aho bashyinguye imibiri, bakareba ibyakozwe kuko ari ukuri, ko atari ibinyoma, ariko bakima amatwi abantu bapfobya jenoside kuko barasakuza cyane, kandi ijwi ryabo naryo hari abana kubera bakiri bato baryumva, ariko bakwiye kwigira ku isoko bakareba bakiga isitori bagasoma ibitabo ewe bakazajya no ku rwibutso kureba bagasura u Rwanda bakareba uko ibintu byagenze ko atari ibinyoma ko atari ibihimbano ndumva ko ari icyo nababwira.
She urging young people to learn by themselves about what happened. So she advising them to be to search more about the genocide, maybe read books about the genocide, listening to speakers like those we have today, like those people who wrote books about their testimony, what happened. But also, if you could go to Rwanda, be able to travel to Rwanda and visit the genocide museums, and you see by yourself what happened there, then it will be easier for you not to listen to those people who are denying the genocide. You will learn by yourself, and then you can know how you will defend the genocide in the eyes of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think for the sake of time, we have to move on, but I just want to say thank you very much for my role here. And I was supposed to be in Rwanda right now. Actually, that was my original plan. And unfortunately, COVID left me doing research here at home. So maybe next year or not too far ahead, I hope to be able to do exactly what Rosalie has recommended that we do. I'm not a young person anymore, though. Unfortunately, I'm part of the old people, but I think maybe getting some young people over there would be a good idea. So I'm going to turn it back to Larissa here at this point.
Okay, thank you for facilitating that, Dr. Ryland. We are almost out of time, but we're like right on time, which is remarkable, honestly. Right now, we are going to hear from Christine McGill, Gabby, and she's going to talk about her book on genocide survivors and the importance of recording stories.
Thank you. So I guess what we're going to talk about kind of ties into what everybody else has been talking about today at the commemoration. And that's just the idea of the importance of preserving these stories and ensuring they get told. So, I mean, I think most of you know that before COVID in 2019, I published a book called The Hope That Remains, which includes 10 survivor testimonies from survivors in Canada and a significant number from here in Calgary. And one of the goals of that book was to write it at a level that could be used in high schools and used in schools and be accessible to anybody, regardless of their background knowledge on Rwanda. And I can tell you that the impact actually has been quite large from those that I've spoken to. There's some book clubs that are using the book now. There's one school in Calgary I know for sure is using the book with their social studies class and the students. So one of the things, my part of this conversation is I want to talk a little bit about the impact that sharing the stories actually has. And some of it's from my own experience and the impact of doing these interviews and documenting these stories. And some of it's the impact that I've also seen it have. So the first is the message of forgiveness that comes out of the stories. In each interview that I did, and that's included in the book, there is some form of forgiveness. And forgiveness, I think we sometimes think it means different things, but forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting or not wanting justice. But for most of the survivors that I interviewed, it meant letting go of kind of that anger and that hatred. And some found this through spiritual means and through the church. Some found this through counseling, some through building a new life and a new future. One of the most profound things a survivor told me was that forgiveness and reconciliation were a gift they were giving to the next generation, and that it was an act of choice that they were making so that the next generation could have a better future. So for myself as a Canadian, this really made me rethink the way that I viewed forgiveness in my own life, and the way I go forward now. And when I run into situations the way I address them and view them. And I think for our youth, it's a really important message because we often, especially in a world with social media and the digital era, we don't see a lot of forgiveness per se. We don't necessarily see people making that kind of sacrifice for other people. And forgiveness sometimes really is a sacrifice. And I think that's a message that we really need. The second lesson kind of ties into that, and that is the concept of the resilience of the human spirit. So I know our speaker earlier talked about the importance of hope. When we first were working on the book, it had the working title of The Scars That Remain. And it quickly became clear that that was not what the book should be about or what it should be titled. And the final title was The Hope That Remains, because every story was a story of resilience and of refinding hope and of rebuilding after facing the worst in humanity. For me personally, this was very impactful because I was going through a very difficult crisis in my own life. And recording these stories helped me find resilience within myself and within my own life. And it helped me see the way that rebuilding can happen and how to find that hope in the most difficult situations. And I think that's also an important message that our youth need to hear from survivor testimonies, is they need to hear the stories of resilience and the way that people overcome the worst of humanity and how they get through it and how they build a new life after that happens. And then my last lesson is kind of an unexpected one, I guess. It was unexpected for me, but it is the importance of personal histories in connecting generations. So one of the survivors I interviewed, Bertin, in Montreal, when I finished recording, typing up his story, I sent him his draft and he shared it with his nephew. And his nephew was, I think, a baby at the time the genocide happened and had since come to Canada and was living with him. And he shared that chapter with his nephew, and it was the first time he told his nephew what he'd lived through. And as a result, it created a new dialogue for them. His nephew started to understand why his uncle was so hard on him, why some things in the relationship where they way they were, and why his uncle would push him towards accomplishing certain things. It kind of started to bridge that gap of how important it is that these stories and these messages continue to be carried on, and the way that they've shaped people's lives. So I think not only just sharing testimonies bring that to Rwandan families, but it also can bring that to the new generation that really has very little knowledge about the Rwandan genocide or the importance of fighting divisionism. We're in pretty much the most divisive period of history in my very short life. And more than anything, we need to encourage people to fight divisionism and to fight the things that are separating us and tearing us apart. I'm going to pass it off to Gabby, but very quickly, I do want to just acknowledge that here today, we actually have a Canadian peacekeeper. Greg was part of a Canadian contingent of peacekeepers that went into the immediate aftermath of the genocide. Most people are aware of Romeo Dallaire, but very few people are aware that there was a lot of Canadian peacekeepers that served from July of 1994 till early 1995. And Greg was part of a group that was responsible for reestablishing the communication networks within the country, and so that calls could be made to outside of Rwanda as well. So I know that the Rwandan veterans community of Canada is now working very hard to also start speaking out and to help try fight the denial that is out there and tell the story that they witnessed as well. So go ahead, Gabby.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christine. I had a chance to read your book, and it looks like every story is different, but the wounds are the same. And even though the wounds are the same, but the pains, they're also different depending on what everybody went through. So by telling their stories, that's the only way they can heal those pain. Yeah, and again, this record of the books and the stories is very important when people need to know what happened. Like Darren asked, they don't know what happened because they were too young. If you look today in Rwanda, 70% of the population, they were born after genocide, or they were too young to understand what was happening. So when we tell the stories, they want to know more about it, and they're so curious to understand what happened, why it happened, so and why their relatives are dead, or why their relatives participate in genocide. The only way they can find those answers is through the records. One of them is the media. So the media today is being used by the youth, as you know, but unfortunately the media they're using today is the same media the genocide deniers are using. So it's hard for them to know what's true and what's not. But by telling our own stories, they will know the truth. So that's, I think, by the telling the stories told by the survivors, they will know the truth is really the truth, and not from what the genocide deniers are talking about. Because those genocide deniers, they talk about genocide from their own point of view. Yeah, their own point of view. That's not real. It's that's possible. Because it's easier for them to say whatever they want because there's not enough records. So, and to be honest with you, by myself, I started writing a book. I thought that writing a book, I had enough time. Until recently, I had a conversation with my son. My son asked me if he can go visit my dad, his grandpa. I said that my grandpa is very far away. He was not so far. He said he gave me the phone and asked me to call him. I told him that my dad does not have a phone. He kept asking so many questions about him. I was not ready to tell him the truth. I wasn't prepared. So that gave me the strength to know that I have to start recording my own story. And then that's even, I asked my fellow survivors to write their own stories. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will do it for ourselves. And whatever they do, it will not be the same as what we went through. It will be different. And then, if you know, many of us, we never heard what happened to our dads or grandpa. In 1959 or 1973, there was kind of genocide. Tutsi were dying. But our parents, they were not ready to share what happened to them. So we grew up hearing different stories. We didn't know what happened to them because they didn't leave any records. I wish I knew what happened to my dad when he was young, or my mom, but there was no record, nothing. So I don't want that to happen to my kids. I want them to know what happened to me, because the record is a part of the family heritage. It's a part of family identity. So that's why I think it's really important to leave stories behind. Then before I leave, give you back the comment, I want to ask my fellow survivors, how do you want your stories to be told when you are gone? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christine and Gabby, for sharing that with us. We are going to wrap up in 10 minutes here. I'm going to quickly read a poem written by Cousteau. The poem is called Flame of Peace. This is a poem by Cousteau Omar Ramaningi. We are the world, we are chosen, we are the flame. The Almighty has spoken. Every time we seek his presence is a delight. The flame of peace was his words. Flame is blossoming his majestic that unifies his greatness. Peace is his blessing for all his beloved ones. The light was for peace. Heavenly Father spoke and the light was. Whenever the light leads, peace will be among us. A heart with peace is magnificent. A heart with peace is protected. A heart with peace is proactive. Flame of peace will speak his words. Words that build peace. Words that find peace. Words that predict peace. Words that protect peace. Words that encourage a heart that needs peace. Flame of peace is his majestic face. Face that we seek. Face that we smile. Face that means his image. Face that sees the same. Face that speaks peace. Flame of peace. Before the light was a darkness. Majestic voice spoke and the light was. Flame of peace. Flame was peace. Peace was light. Light that shines our heart. Light that guides our hearts. Light that predicts the future. Light that prevents sorrow. Unity of the world where people live together in peace. No peace of ideas, but reality of peace. Flame of peace. Thank you, Castillo, for writing that. That was a beautiful poem. And I'm going to send it to Melchior to wrap up our meeting right now.
Thank you, Raisa. So as we remember and commemorate and honor the memories of our parents and our siblings, and our friends and our relatives and those whom we knew so well, again, who had their lives taken away very too soon during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. We will not relent and certainly will not grow weary in saying never again. Mama Diane and Console, thank you so much for sharing with us. Your journeys, though different, represent the horror which genocide survivors had to endure, starting in 1959 in Rwanda up to 1994. So our collective hope can be that no more will the genocide happen in Rwanda. And even though everyone, including those from the most powerful countries on earth, watched from afar as Tutsis were being killed days and nights for 100 days without coming to intervene until more than 1 million men, women, and children were killed. It has dawned on Rwandans too that what happened should never be repeated in Rwanda. And we will always call out anything that looks as such because we know what it is. And for this reason, we do support Ukrainian community, and together with the international community, we fully and truly condemn the horrific events unfolding in Ukraine as we speak. And we will be honored, Ms. President, to be of support to your community as much as we can. Thank you so much to Daddy Maximo. I'm so glad you accepted our invitation. Your poem took me back to my person, to Rukumberi, in the village where I was born. I bid farewell to my parents and siblings without knowing I will never see most of them on the next day when I came back home, or to what was home, as home was no more at that time. At seeing the horror left behind by the genocide against the Tutsis, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda said, and I quote, We cannot turn the clock back, nor can we undo the harm caused. But we have the power to determine the future and to ensure that what happened never happens again. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring our event to a close, encouraging survivors to find strength in the support this community that is gathered here today can offer. Also, if you need help, please reach out to the Rwandan community and we'll do our very best to support or refer you to others who may be of a better support. In closing, we cannot do without appreciating members of Rwandan Canadian Society of Calgary and RCA who worked together to raise funds needed to organize this event. Thank you also to so much to the organizing committee for having met again and again since November of last year, help make this event be a success. We started organizing the event during the COVID time, so it was meeting in person was not even in the vocabularies we could use. It just happens that now some people, ask us why we didn't think of COVID slowing down, but we just hoped that Zoom will do again as today is. So thank you so much to Dr. Regine King, Kathy Rwamonengi, Costo Rwamonengi, Bienvenue Rwabigwi, Maurice Munezero, Diane Omwari, Dr. Eliab Ainebiona, Jeanette Ruti, Evariste Mugenzi, Andy Amour, Norbert Munyarusisiro, Richard Mumvaneza, Zaverine Mukandori, Claudette Erusaro, Christine Karebgaire, Clotilde Naganda, Dr. Esdras Njenzi, Annette Chiza, Gabriel Mbonigaba, Eugenie Njenzi, Eugenie Mugabo, Anezi Ingabire Kanmugire, Christine McGill, Larissa Amour, and of course, Dr. Glenn Ryland, who facilitated our question and answer session. Thank you also so much to our guests from Calgary and the area, and also many thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Ostash from Rwandan High Commission in Ottawa. We'll come close to the end of our event today. And again, I want to say thank you once again, and we'll look forward to meeting again next year. And God's willing, we'll get to meet in person. So it's been an honor for me to get to work alongside our organizers, but also to be the president of this great community. So thank you so much. May you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.